They dragged me to a holding cell so they could steal my property. My daughter and her husband laughed, saying, "Rot in prison. Everything is ours now, old man." But when the warden locked the door, he noticed the ring on my hand. He leaned in and whispered, "Tonight, you know who you really are. My name is Luther Banks, and I am 69 years old. I thought I had built a legacy for my family, but I had actually built a nest for vipers. If you want to know how a retired mechanic brought down a corrupt empire from inside a prison cell, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. The end of my life as a free man did not begin with a warning. It began with the sound of splintering oak at 5 in the morning. Boom. My front door, the solid mahogany door I had installed with my own hands 30 years ago, exploded inward. Before I could even swing my legs out of bed, the hallway was flooded with blinding tactical lights. "Police, get on the ground, now!" Get on. The shouting was deafening. I was 69 years old, sleeping in my flannel pajamas, yet they stormed my bedroom like I was a cartel boss. I tried to raise my hands, tried to ask what was happening, but a heavy boot slammed into my back, driving the air from my lungs. My face was pressed against the cold hardwood floor. I tasted dust and blood. "I am an old man," I wheezed, feeling my arthritic shoulders scream in protest as my arms were wrenched behind my back. "You have the wrong house! We have the right house!" "Mr. Banks," a voice snarled from above me. "Stop resisting!" I was not resisting, I was trying to breathe. Metal cuffs bit into my wrists tight enough to cut off circulation. They hauled me up my knees, buckling. That was when I saw him. Gavin Pierce walked into my bedroom, my son-in-law. He was not wearing pajamas. He was wearing a sharp navy suit, his hair perfectly gelled, looking like he was ready to close a real estate deal. He stepped over the debris of my doorframe with a look of practiced concern on his face. "Officer, be careful with him," Gavin said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I told you on the phone. He is having one of his episodes. He is violent. He does not know who we are." I stared at him, the shock temporarily numbing the pain in my shoulder. Gavin was a mediocre real estate agent who had not sold a house in 6 months. I knew he was desperate. I knew he owed money. But I never thought he would stage a SWAT raid on his own father-in-law. "Liar," I growled, finding my footing. "I know exactly who you are, Gavin. You are a thief who owes $50,000 to loan sharks. Get out of my house." "See?" Gavin said, turning to the lead officer. "Paranoia. Aggression. It is just like the report says. He thinks everyone is stealing from him. Please, officer, check under the pillow. I am terrified he has the weapon I told you about." The officer shoved me aside and flipped my mattress. My heart stopped. There, sitting where I usually kept my Bible, was a snub-nosed .38 caliber revolver. It was old, rusty, and completely unfamiliar to me. I had never owned a gun in my life. I solved problems with words or with my fists back in the day, never with bullets. "That is not mine," I shouted, struggling against the cuffs. "He planted that. Check the prints. He threatens my wife with it." Gavin interrupted, his voice shaking with a performance worthy of an award. "My poor Zoe. He waves it around, saying the government is coming for his gold. He is a danger to himself and others. We need that 5150 hold immediately." The officer looked at the gun, then at me. A black man in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood accused of being armed and demented by a well-dressed white man. I knew in that second that the truth did not matter. The narrative was already written. "Get him out of here," the officer ordered. They dragged me through the hallway of the house I had bought in 1982. They dragged me past the photos of my late wife, Beatrice. I saw that one of the frames was shattered on the floor. "Wait!" a voice cried out from the living room. It was Zoe, my daughter, my only child. The officers paused near the front entrance. Zoe was huddled on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, sobbing. For a fleeting second, a spark of hope ignited in my chest. Zoe would stop this. Zoe knew I was sane. Zoe knew I spent my days gardening and fixing bicycles for the neighborhood kids, not waving guns at ghosts. "Zoe, baby, tell them," I pleaded, looking into her eyes. "Tell them Gavin is lying. Tell them this is a mistake." Zoe looked up. Her eyes were red, but they were not looking at me with love. They were looking at me with shame and fear, but not fear for me, fear of her husband. "I am so sorry, Daddy," she whimpered, her voice trembling. "But Gavin is right. You are sick. You are not safe here anymore. We just want you to get help." The betrayal hit me harder than the police boot. My own blood. I had paid for her college. I had paid for her wedding to this snake. I had held her when she cried over broken hearts. And now she was signing my life away. She picked up a clipboard from the coffee table. I recognized the document. It was an involuntary psychiatric commitment form. And I recognized the signature at the bottom, Dr. Evans. My mind raced. Dr. Evans was not my doctor. Dr. Evans was a man I knew from the old days, a man with a gambling addiction so severe he would sign a death warrant for $500. Gavin had found the weak link. They had forged a medical history claiming I had advanced dementia and violent tendencies. Zoe, do not sign that, I said, my voice low and dangerous. If you sign that paper, you are not my daughter anymore. You are an accessory to a crime. Gavin stepped between us, placing a possessive hand on Zoe's shoulder. He squeezed it. I saw her wince. Sign it, honey, Gavin said softly. It is for his own good. Zoe's hand shook, but she signed. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was the loudest sound in the room. Take him, Gavin commanded. The officers shoved me out the door and into the cool morning air. The neighbors were watching. Mrs. Higgins from across the street had her hand over her mouth. I held my head high. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me struggle. As they pushed me into the back of the patrol car, Gavin leaned in. The officers were busy securing the door, giving him a split second of privacy. The mask of the concerned son-in-law dropped. A cruel, arrogant smirk twisted his face. You should have just sold the property when I asked, Old Man Gavin whispered, his breath smelling of stale coffee and greed. This house sits on a gold mine, and now, as your legal guardian, it is my playground. Rot in prison, Luther, or the asylum. I do not care which. The door slammed shut, sealing me in the cage. I watched through the wire mesh as Gavin put his arm around Zoe and led her back into my house. My house. He was already pulling his phone out of his pocket, probably calling his creditors to tell them payday was coming. They thought they had won. They thought Luther Banks was just a retired mechanic, a senile old man who would fade away into the system. They thought they were dealing with a victim. I looked down at my hands, cuffed in my lap. On my right ring finger was a heavy silver ring. It was tarnished, scratched, and looked like a piece of junk to the untrained eye. It bore the crest of a lion. Gavin had made a mistake, a fatal mistake. He saw the house, he saw the bank accounts, but he did not see the history. He did not know who I was before I was a mechanic. He did not know about the favors I was owed or the secrets I kept buried under the floorboards of this city. The patrol car lurched forward, taking me to the county processing center. I did not cry. I did not panic. I sat in the darkness and I began to count. I counted the assets they were trying to steal. I counted the lies they had told, and I calculated exactly how much pain I was going to inflict on Gavin Pierce. My daughter had chosen her side. She chose a man who saw her father as a paycheck. She would learn the hard way that blood might be thicker than water, but loyalty is thicker than blood. The ride to the station was long. The officers up front were joking about coffee and overtime, completely unaware they had a wolf in the back seat. They thought they were transporting a confused geriatric patient. When we arrived at the holding facility, the humiliation continued. They took my belt, they took my shoelaces, they treated me like cattle. I let them, I saved my energy. I was placed in a holding cell with a dozen other men. The smell of urine and bleach was overwhelming. A young kid in the corner was crying. A man with face tattoos was pacing. I found a spot on the concrete bench and sat down, closing my eyes. I needed to think. I needed to access the network I had abandoned 30 years ago. Hey, Pops, a voice called out. I opened my eyes. A guard was standing at the bars. He wasn't a regular police officer. He was corrections. He looked mean, bored, and looking for entertainment. Nice ring, the guard sneered, pointing his baton at my hand. Hand it over. Personal effects go in the bag. I looked at the ring, then I looked at the guard. This stays with me, I said calmly. The guard laughed. He unlocked the cell door and stepped inside. The other prisoners backed away, sensing violence. You do not make the rules here, Grandpa, the guard said, reaching for my hand. Give me the ring or I break the finger. He grabbed my wrist. It was instinct. Muscle memory that had been dormant for decades. I didn't think. I moved. I rotated my wrist, breaking his grip, and in one fluid motion, I drove my shoulder into his chest and twisted his arm behind his back. The torque was precise. He screamed as his shoulder joint popped. I shoved him against the bars. He slid down, clutching his arm, gasping for air. The entire cell block went silent. The 69-year-old mechanic had just dropped a man half his age in 3 seconds. Alarms blared. Red lights flashed. Code Blue officer down, holding cell 4 boots, thundered down the hallway. The heavy steel door at the end of the corridor flew open. A squad of tactical guards rushed in, shields up, batons drawn. Leading them was a giant of a man. The Warden. He was a mountain of muscle, a black man with a scar running down his cheek and eyes that had seen everything. Warden Miller. They called him Big Jim. He was known for breaking riots with his bare hands. Back away from the gate. Away from the... Miller roared, his voice shaking the walls. Get on the ground or we open fire. I stood in the center of the cell. I did not get on the ground. I straightened my spine. I adjusted my pajama top. I said, "Get down!" Miller shouted, raising a taser aimed directly at my chest. He marched up to the bars, ready to give the order to storm the cell and beat me into submission. He looked me in the face, furious, and then his eyes drifted down. He saw my hand resting on the cell bar. He saw the silver ring with the lion crest. Warden Miller froze. The anger drained from his face, instantly replaced by something I had not seen in a very long time. Fear and recognition. His face went pale, a grayish hue under the fluorescent lights. He lowered the taser slowly. His mouth opened, but no words came out for a moment. He signaled to his tactical team. "Stand down," Miller whispered. His voice was trembling. "Sir," one of the guards asked, confused. "He assaulted an officer." I said, "Stand down." Miller barked, turning on his own men. "Back up, all of you. Get out of this block, now." The guards looked at each other, bewildered, but they obeyed. They retreated, dragging the injured guard with them. When we were alone, separated only by the iron bars, Warden Miller stepped closer. He looked at the ring again, then up at my eyes. He swallowed hard. He dropped to one knee, right there on the dirty concrete floor. Mr. Banks Miller whispered, his voice shaking. We all thought you were dead." Since '92. I looked down at the man who ran this prison. I remembered him as a skinny kid I had pulled out of a burning car in the riots. I remembered paying for his first suit. "I am not dead, Jim," I said quietly. "But I am currently being inconvenienced." Miller nodded rapidly, sweat beading on his forehead. "Open this door, Jim," I said. "We have work to do." Miller scrambled to his feet, fumbling for his keys. He unlocked the cell door and swung it open wide. "Tonight," Miller said, holding the door for me, "you know who you are, and tomorrow they will know too." I stepped out of the cell. My house was gone. My daughter was a traitor. My assets were compromised. But as I walked down that prison hallway with the warden of the facility acting as my personal bodyguard, I knew one thing. Gavin Pierce had locked me up to steal my property, but he had just locked me in with my army. Before I continue this story, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Tell me your story in the comments. Hit like and subscribe, because what happens next is not a legal battle. It is a war. And I was about to turn this prison into my war room. The processing center smelled of industrial bleach and old sweat. It was a scent that never left your clothes, no matter how many times you washed them. They marched me down a long concrete corridor, my bare feet slapping against the cold floor. I was 69 years old, a homeowner, a taxpayer, a man who had built a life from the ashes of the past, and now I was being herded like cattle. "Strip," the officer barked. He was a man with a thick neck and eyes that had seen too much misery to care about one more old man. I did not argue. I did not fight. There is a time for war, and there is a time for silence. I removed my flannel pajama top, folding it neatly on the bench. I removed the bottoms. I stood there naked under the buzzing fluorescent lights while 2 guards looked me over with bored indifference. They were looking for contraband for tattoos that signaled gang affiliation, for scars that told a story. They found plenty of scars. There was the knife wound on my ribs from '78, the bullet graze on my thigh from '82, burn marks on my back from a Molotov cocktail that came through a window in '90. The guards paused, their eyes lingering on the map of violence etched into my skin. They exchanged a look. These were not the scars of a senile old man who gardened on weekends. These were the scars of a soldier. "Turn around," the officer commanded. I turned. They sprayed me with a cold chemical mist that burned my eyes and tasted like copper. It was meant to kill lice and other vermin, but its real purpose was to strip away the last layer of your humanity. It was designed to make you feel small, dirty, and powerless. I closed my eyes and let the cold spray hit me. I went to a place inside my mind, a dark room I had locked away 30 years ago. In that room, I was not a victim. In that room, I was the one who gave the orders. "Put this on," the guard said, tossing a bundle of orange fabric at me. The jumpsuit was stiff and smelled of another man's fear. It was 2 sizes too big. I pulled it on the rough fabric, scratching against my skin. They handed me a pair of canvas slip-ons with no laces. Every part of this process was designed to remind you that you owned nothing, not even your own body. "Personal effects," the guard muttered, holding open a large plastic bag. I handed over my wedding ring. It pained me to part with it. Beatrice had put that ring on my finger 40 years ago. The guard dropped it into the bag with a clatter. "Now the other one," he said, pointing to my right hand. I looked at the silver ring with the lion crest. It was thick, heavy, and sat tight on my knuckle. My arthritis had swollen the joint over the years, making the ring a permanent part of my hand. "It does not come off," I said, my voice rasping from dehydration. "The knuckle is swollen. You would have to cut the finger." The guard stepped closer, grabbing my hand roughly. He tugged at the ring. I did not flinch, though the pain shot up my arm. He pulled harder, twisting the metal against the bone. It did not budge. "Fine," he grunted, shoving my hand away. "Medical can deal with it later. If they have to cut it off, they will charge you for the saw blade." They shoved me into a holding cell at the end of the block. It was a transition tank, a place where they kept the new arrivals before assigning them to a permanent block. I sat on the metal bench, my back straight, my hands folded in my lap. I stared at the wall opposite me. I did not look at the graffiti scratched into the paint. I did not look at the other men pacing the cage. I looked through the concrete, visualizing my house, visualizing Gavin's face, visualizing the fire I was going to rain down upon his life. Time loses its meaning in a place like that. It could have been hours or minutes. The heavy steel door of the block clanged open and a new shift of guards walked in. One of them was young. He could not have been more than 25. He walked with a swagger that he had not earned, his baton tapping rhythmically against his thigh. He had the eager, cruel eyes of a man who enjoyed the power of the badge a little too much. We used to call them rookies. They were the most dangerous kind because they had something to prove. The rookie stopped in front of my cell. He looked me up and down, sneering at my gray hair and the way the orange jumpsuit hung on my frame. "What do we have here?" he asked, his voice echoing in the small space. "Another grandpa who forgot to take his meds." I did not respond. I did not even blink. The rookie did not like being ignored. He rattled his baton against the bars. "I am talking to you, old man," he snapped. "Stand up when a screw talks to you." I slowly turned my head to look at him. My expression was blank, devoid of fear or respect. That angered him even more. He unlocked the cell door and stepped inside. The air in the room changed instantly. The other prisoners in the cell, 3 young men dealing drugs, scrambled to the back corner. They knew violence when they smelled it. The rookie got in my face. He smelled of peppermint gum and cheap aftershave. "You think you are tough," he whispered. His eyes dropped to my hands. He saw the silver ring. The lion crest caught the light. His eyes widened, not with recognition, but with greed. "That is contraband," he said, reaching for my hand. "Jewelry is not allowed in the tank. Hand it over." "It stays," I said calmly. My voice was low, a rumble deep in my chest. "I said give it to me," the rookie shouted. He grabbed my wrist, his grip digging into my tendons. "It is a nice piece of silver. Probably fetch $50 at the pawn shop. I bet you stole it anyway." He pulled at the ring. It stuck on the knuckle. He laughed a cruel, sharp sound. "I guess we do this the hard way," he said. He reached for his belt and unclipped a pair of heavy wire cutters. He wasn't going to cut the ring. He was going to cut the finger. I looked him in the eye. The air in the cell went freezing cold. "Touch that ring," I said, "and you will lose the hand that holds the tool." The rookie blinked, surprised by the sudden threat. Then his face twisted into a mask of rage. He raised his baton. "You threaten me, inmate," he screamed. He swung the baton. It was a vicious overhand strike aimed directly at my skull. It was a blow meant to crack bone and silence me for good. But he was slow. He was telegraphing his moves like a drunk in a bar fight. I did not think. I moved. Decades of rust fell away in a microsecond. I shifted my weight, slipping to the left. The baton whooshed past my ear, striking the metal bench with a deafening clang. Before he could recover, I stepped into his guard. I wasn't just an old mechanic. I was a man who had survived the streets when they ran red with blood. I grabbed his wrist, the one holding the baton, and I clamped down with a grip of iron. He gasped, looking down at my hand. He tried to pull away, but he was trapped. I rotated my hips and drove my elbow into his solar plexus. The air left his body in a rush. He doubled over. I did not let go of his arm. I twisted it behind his back, forcing the joint against its natural range of motion. "You should have listened," I whispered in his ear. I applied pressure. There was a sickening wet snap, the sound of an elbow popping out of its socket. The rookie screamed. It was a high, thin sound that bounced off the concrete walls. He dropped the baton. He dropped to his knees, his arm dangling at a useless angle. I stepped back, adjusting my jumpsuit. I stood over him, breathing steadily. My heart rate had barely increased. Alarms erupted. The air filled with the screech of sirens and flashing red lights. "Officer down," a voice roared over the intercom. "Sector 4, all available units." I heard the heavy boots before I saw them. A tactical team was thundering down the corridor. They were coming to crush the inmate who had dared to touch a guard. The heavy steel doors at the end of the block flew open. 6 men in riot gear poured in, shields up, tasers drawn. Leading them was a giant. He was a mountain of a man, easily 6'5", with shoulders that filled the doorway. He wore a pristine white shirt with the gold oak leaves of a warden on the collar. His head was shaved and a jagged scar ran from his ear to his jawline. Warden Miller. They called him Big Jim. I knew the legend. He ran this prison with an iron fist. He was a man who did not tolerate disorder. On the ground, Miller roared, his voice shaking the dust from the ceiling. "Get on the ground now or we open fire." The tactical team fanned out, surrounding the cell. 6 red laser dots appeared on my chest. The rookie was still on the floor, sobbing, clutching his broken arm. "He is crazy," he wailed. "He broke my arm. Kill him." Miller stepped forward, pushing past his men. He pulled a taser from his holster and aimed it at my face. His eyes were burning with fury. He was looking at a cop killer, a threat, a problem that needed to be erased. "Last warning," Miller shouted. "Down. Now." I did not get down. I stood my ground. I raised my right hand, placing it on the cold iron bar of the cell door. I looked Miller in the eye. I did not speak. I just held his gaze. Miller's finger tightened on the trigger. He was a split second away from dropping me, but then his eyes flickered. He looked at the laser dot on my chest. Then he looked at my hand resting on the bar. He saw the ring. The silver was tarnished, but the crest was unmistakable. The lion with the crown. The symbol of the man who had ruled the underground of this city 30 years ago. The symbol of the man who had saved a young, starving Jim Miller from a life of crime and paid for his education. The color drained from Miller's face. It happened in an instant. One moment he was a statue of rage, the next he looked like he had seen a ghost. His skin turned an ashen gray. The taser in his hand wavered. He lowered the weapon slowly. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He took a step closer, squinting as if he couldn't believe what his eyes were telling him. He looked at my face. He looked past the wrinkles, past the gray hair, and he saw the eyes of the man he once called boss. Sweat broke out on his forehead. He began to tremble. "Sir," one of the tactical officers shouted. "Do we engage?" Miller snapped out of his trance. He spun around, facing his own men. "Stand down," he barked. His voice was cracking. The officers looked confused. "Sir, he assaulted a guard. He is armed and dangerous." I said, "Stand down." Miller screamed, his panic rising. "Lower your weapons. Get out. All of you. Get out of this block right now." "But sir, the rookie is hurt," another officer protested. "Drag him out," Miller ordered, pointing at the sobbing guard on the floor. "Get him out of here and clear the room. I want this entire sector empty in 30 seconds. Go." The tactical team hesitated for a fraction of a second, but the terror in Miller's voice was contagious. They grabbed the rookie by his belt and dragged him out of the cell. They backed out of the room, shields still raised, confusion written all over their faces. The heavy steel door slammed shut, leaving us alone in the sudden silence. Miller stood there, breathing heavy. He holstered his taser with a shaking hand. He walked up to the bars. He looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time in decades. "Mr. Banks," he whispered. The name sounded foreign in his mouth, like a prayer he hadn't said in years. I nodded slowly. "Hello, Jim." Miller swallowed hard. He looked around to make sure no cameras were watching, though he ran the place. He grabbed the bars with both hands, his knuckles turning white. Then the warden of the state penitentiary did the unthinkable. He dropped to one knee on the dirty concrete floor. He bowed his head. "I thought you were dead," Miller said, his voice thick with emotion. "The word on the street was that you died in the fire of '92. We mourned you. I mourned you." I looked down at him. I remembered the skinny kid with the stutter I had pulled off the corner. I remembered giving him a book instead of a gun. "I died so Luther Banks the mechanic could live," I said softly. "But it seems the mechanic has been retired." Miller looked up, tears shining in his eyes. "Why are you here, sir? Who did this to you, family?" I said, the word tasting like bile. "My daughter and her husband. They think I am senile. They think I am prey." Miller's face hardened. The fear vanished, replaced by a cold, lethal loyalty. He stood up, straightening his uniform. He reached for his keys. "They made a mistake," Miller said, unlocking the cell door. "A grave mistake." He swung the door open. He did not treat me like a prisoner. He stepped aside, holding the door for me like a chauffeur. "Come with me," Sir Miller said. "You do not belong in a cage. You belong in the command center." I stepped out of the cell. I rubbed my wrist where the handcuffs had been. "Jim," I said, "I need eyes on the outside. I need to know what they are doing in my house." Miller nodded. "I have access to everything. Traffic cams, municipal records, private feeds. If it is digital, we can see it." He led me toward the exit. "Tonight," Miller said, his voice low and dangerous, "the world finds out that the lion was only sleeping." As we walked down the corridor, the other prisoners pressed their faces against the bars, watching in silence. They didn't know who I was, but they knew power when they saw it. The old man in the oversized jumpsuit was walking with the warden, not in chains, but as an equal. I touched the ring on my finger. Gavin wanted my property. Zoe wanted my money. They were about to find out that some inheritances are a curse. "Take me to your office, Jim," I said. "It is time to go to work." The warden's office was a fortress of mahogany and leather that smelled of expensive cigars, but Jim Miller looked like a terrified child sitting behind his massive desk. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid, his hands trembling so much the bottle clinked against the crystal. He slid 1 glass across the desk to me and swallowed his own in a single gulp. "I cannot believe you are here, Luther," he said, his voice thick with a mixture of awe and shame. "You saved my life in '90. I was a 20-year-old rookie guard surrounded by 300 rioting inmates in C Block. They had shivs, they had fire, they were going to peel the skin off my bones, and then you stepped out of your cell." I took a sip of the bourbon. It burned pleasantly. "I remember, Jim. You were skinny back then. You had dropped your baton. You walked into the middle of the kill zone." Miller continued, his eyes distant. "You did not raise your voice. You just looked at the ringleader. You told him that if he touched a hair on my head, the streets outside would burn his entire family line to ash." The riot stopped. "Just like that. You took a knife to the arm for me that day." He pointed to the scar on my forearm hidden beneath the orange jumpsuit. "I owe you a life debt," Miller said, leaning forward. "I can have you out the back gate in 10 minutes. I will wipe the logs. I will make the paperwork vanish. You can disappear. Go to the islands. Live out your days in peace." I set the glass down with a sharp click. The sound made Miller jump. "I am not running, Jim," I said, my voice cold and steady. "If I run, I am a fugitive. If I run, I am the senile old man they say I am. I am not leaving this prison until I own the people who put me in here." Miller looked confused. "Then what do you want?" I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the prison yard. "I want solitary," I said. "Put me in the hole, but not a cage. I want it turned into a command center. I need monitors. I need a secure line. And I need access to the IP address I am about to give you." Miller hesitated for only a second. Then the soldier in him snapped back to attention. "Done," he said. "We have a secure observation room in the basement. Soundproof, internet hardline, no cameras inside. It is yours." He typed a command into his computer. "We are going dark, Luther. You do not exist in the system. As far as the police know, you are being processed in the general population. But in reality, you are a ghost." "Good," I said. "Now pull up the feed." I gave him the code. Years ago, I had installed a high-end security system in my house, not because I was afraid of burglars, but because I knew that one day the wolves would come from the inside. I had cameras hidden in the smoke detectors, the bookshelves, and even the crown molding. Miller typed in the code. The large screens on his wall flickered to life. My heart turned to stone in my chest. The high-definition feed showed my living room. It looked like a war zone. Gavin and Zoe were there. They were not mourning my absence. They were celebrating it. Gavin had a sledgehammer in his hand. He was smashing the drywall in the hallway, looking for wall safes, looking for cash, looking for anything of value. Dust filled the air. My furniture, the pieces I had bought with Beatrice, were overturned and slashed open. "Where is it?" Gavin screamed, swinging the hammer into the plaster. The old man had money. I know he did. He did not live on a mechanic's salary. "Where is the stash?" Zoe was sitting on the floor, surrounded by old photo albums. She was ripping pictures out of the frames, tossing them into a black garbage bag. She was erasing me. "Look at them, Jim," I whispered, my eyes glued to the screen. "Look at my legacy." On the screen, Gavin marched into the master bedroom. My bedroom. He began tearing the drawers out of the dresser, dumping my clothes on the floor. He found a small blue ceramic urn on the nightstand. Beatrice, my wife. Her ashes. Gavin picked up the urn. He shook it, hoping to hear the rattle of coins or jewelry. When he realized it was just ash, he sneered. "Useless garbage," he spat. "No!" I hissed at the screen, my hands gripping the edge of Miller's desk so hard the wood groaned. Gavin walked to the kitchen trash can. He did not hesitate. He popped the lid of the urn and dumped my wife's ashes into the garbage on top of coffee grounds and banana peels. Dust to dust, he laughed, tossing the empty ceramic jar onto the floor where it shattered. Zoe looked up. She saw what he did. For a second, I saw a flicker of horror on her face. That was her mother. That was the woman who sang her to sleep. "Gavin, that is... Mom," she whimpered. "Shut up and keep looking," Gavin snapped. "Unless you want to end up in the poorhouse like your father. Do you want the creditors to break your legs? Find the money, Zoe." Zoe looked at the trash can. She looked at her husband, and then she looked down. She picked up another photo album and continued ripping the pages. She did not stand up. She did not fight for her mother dignity. She chose her master. In that moment, the last shred of fatherly love I held for my daughter evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, empty void. They had not just stolen my property. They had desecrated my sanctuary. They had thrown my heart into the trash. Miller looked away, unable to watch the cruelty. "That is, I am sorry, Luther." "Do not be sorry," I said, my voice sounding like grinding gravel. "Watch, because now I know exactly what punishment fits the crime." I watched them destroy my home for another hour. It was torture, psychological flaying. Every smash of the hammer was a blow to my soul, but I forced myself to watch. I needed to burn this image into my brain so I would not hesitate when the time came to pull the trigger. Suddenly, Gavin stopped. He was in the study, ripping up the carpet. He froze. He tapped the floorboards with the hammer. It made a hollow sound. "Got you," he whispered. I leaned closer to the screen. A dark smile touched my lips. "He found it," I said softly. "Found what Miller asked." "The bait," I replied. Gavin pried up the loose floorboards with the claw of the hammer. Underneath was a steel floor safe. It was old, heavy, and looked like it held the crown jewels. Gavin howled with joy. Zoe ran into the room, her eyes lighting up with greed. "It is here!" Gavin shouted. The old miser hid it under the floor. "This is it, baby. This is the jackpot." He tried the handle. Locked. "Of course. Get the grinder," Gavin ordered. "It is in the garage." Zoe ran to get my tools. My own tools. She came back with my angle grinder. Gavin plugged it in. The high-pitched whine of the motor buzzed through the speakers in the Warden office. Sparks flew as Gavin touched the grinding wheel to the steel hinges. He was sweating, manic desperate. He looked like a man who had just found water in the desert. He thought he was cutting into a fortune. He thought he was minutes away from paying off his debts and living like a king. He had no idea. "Cut it," I whispered to the screen, my face illuminated by the shower of sparks on the monitor. "Open it, son." Miller looked at me nervously. "What is in there, Luther?" "Gold. Cash." I looked at the warden and my smile did not reach my eyes. "No, Jim. There is no money in that safe. There is something much more valuable and much more dangerous." Gavin leaned his entire weight into the grinder. The metal groaned and gave way. He kicked the door of the safe. It swung open. The look on his face shifted from greed to confusion. He reached inside. I sat back in the leather chair in the warden office and crossed my arms. "Welcome to hell, Gavin," I said. The trap was sprung, and he had walked right into it. Gavin reached into the dark void of the floor safe. His hands were shaking with a mixture of adrenaline and greed. Zoe was leaning over his shoulder, her eyes wide, reflecting the sparks from the grinder that still danced in the air. They were both holding their breath, waiting for the glint of gold bars or the stack of crisp $100 bills that would solve all their problems. I watched from the safety of the warden's office, my arms crossed, a cold satisfaction settling in my gut. I knew exactly what his fingers were brushing against. It was not wealth, it was ruin. Gavin pulled out a thick manila envelope. It was heavy, but not heavy enough to be gold. He frowned, confused. He tipped the envelope upside down, and a stack of documents slid out onto the dusty floorboards. There were no diamonds. There were no bearer bonds, just paper. "What is that?" Zoe asked, her voice trembling with disappointment. "Is that it? Is that all he had?" Gavin fell to his knees. He grabbed the papers, flipping through them frantically. He was looking for a deed, a bank account number, anything he could liquidate. But as his eyes scanned the pages, the color drained from his face until he looked like a corpse. He wasn't looking at my assets. He was looking at his own secrets. I had spent the last 6 months buying up Gavin debt. Every time he gambled at the underground poker rooms in the city, I knew. Every time he borrowed money from loan sharks to keep up the appearance of a successful real estate mogul, I knew. I had used my contacts, the old network that Miller thought was dead, to purchase his promissory notes. The first page Gavin held was a signed confession of debt to the Russians for $40,000. The second was a lien against his car. The third was a foreclosure notice on an apartment he claimed to own but was actually renting. But the real knife in the gut was the photographs. I watched on the monitor as Gavin shuffled past the financial documents and froze. He was staring at a series of high-resolution photos. They showed him coming out of a motel room on the south side. He was not alone. He was with a woman who was definitely not my daughter. She was young blonde, and she was hanging off his arm with a familiarity that made my stomach turn. Gavin looked up at Zoe, panic wild in his eyes. He shoved the photos back into the stack, hiding them against his chest. "What is it?" Gavin, Zoe asked, reaching for the papers. "Let me see. Maybe it is stocks. Maybe it is bonds." "No," Gavin snapped, pulling away from her. "It is nothing. Just old tax returns. Garbage. The old man is senile. He kept trash in a safe. He was lying to her face. He was holding proof of his infidelity and his financial ruin, and he looked at the woman who had just betrayed her father for him and lied without blinking." "Let me see," Zoe insisted, grabbing at his arm. "Do not touch it," Gavin roared, shoving her back. She stumbled and fell against the bookshelf. I stood up in the warden's office. That was my daughter. Traitor or not, seeing him put his hands on her made the rage flare up inside me. Miller saw my expression and placed a hand on the phone, ready to call in the cavalry, but I shook my head. Not yet. Let them eat each other. Gavin scrambled to his feet, stuffing the papers into his suit jacket. He was sweating profusely now. He realized that the safe wasn't a treasure chest. It was a message. He realized that I knew everything. He looked around the room, his eyes darting to the corners of the ceiling. He was starting to feel the eyes on him. "It is empty, Zoe," he said, his voice cracking. "Just useless papers. We have to go. We have to figure something else out." Zoe sat on the floor crying. "We destroyed the house for nothing." "He has nothing, Gavin. We are broke. We are going to lose everything." Gavin didn't answer. He was too busy trying to keep his hands from shaking. He knew that the debt notes in his pocket had due dates, and some of them were past due. Suddenly, a shrill sound cut through the silence of the destroyed study. It was Gavin's cell phone. He pulled it out of his pocket. He looked at the screen, and his knees almost gave out. He stared at the caller ID with sheer terror. "Answer it, son," I whispered to the screen. Gavin answered the phone, bringing it to his ear slowly. "Hello." I could not hear the other side of the call through the security cameras, but I didn't need to. I knew who was calling. It was not a bill collector from a bank. It was a man named Silas, a collector for the syndicate. I had arranged for Silas to make this call the moment the safe was opened. Gavin listened. His face went slack. He looked around the room again, this time with true paranoia. "No, I did not find any money," he stammered into the phone. "Just papers. I swear. Please, I need more time." He listened again. He walked to the window and looked out into the street. He pulled the curtain shut quickly. You are watching me, Gavin whispered. Zoe looked up, wiping her eyes. Who are you talking to, Gavin? Who is watching us? Gavin ignored her. He was trapped in a nightmare. The voice on the other end was telling him that they knew he had opened the safe. They knew he was desperate, and they wanted their money by midnight or they would take it out of his skin. I do not have it, Gavin pleaded. The old man, he locked everything up. I need a few days. Just give me 48 hours. I have assets. I control the property now. He listened for one final instruction. Then the line went dead. Gavin dropped the phone. He looked like he was about to vomit. Who was that? Zoe screamed, standing up. Gavin. Talk to me. Gavin turned to her. The look of love and partnership was gone. Now there was only survival. He grabbed Zoe by the shoulders, his fingers digging into her flesh. We have to sell the house, he said, his voice manic. Tonight, right now. Sell the house, Zoe asked, confused. But we cannot. The probate court hasn't fully cleared the title. It will take months. We do not have months, Gavin shouted, shaking her. We have hours. I know a guy, a developer. He buys properties for cash, no questions asked. He has been trying to buy this block for years. But this is my childhood home, Zoe cried. Dad built this place. We cannot just sell it to a flipper for cash. It is worth $500,000. We will get $200,000 if we are lucky, Gavin said, dragging her toward the kitchen. And we are going to take it. Because if we do not have cash by tomorrow morning, bad things are going to happen, Zoe. Very bad things. He threw a contract onto the kitchen table. It was a document he had prepared weeks ago just in case. A quick sale agreement to a shell company called Obsidian Holdings. Sign it, Gavin ordered. Zoe looked at the paper. Then she looked at the man she had married. For the first time, I saw the doubt in her eyes. She was realizing that maybe her father wasn't the villain. Maybe she had made a deal with the devil. I cannot sign this, Gavin, she said. It is stealing. Dad is still alive. He is as good as dead, Gavin spat. You signed the commitment papers, Zoe. You declared him incompetent. That makes you the trustee. You have the power. Sign the damn paper. He picked up a steak knife from the counter. He didn't point it at her, but he held it tight, his knuckles white. The threat was implicit. He was a drowning man, and he would pull her under with him. Sign it, or we lose everything, he hissed. Zoe picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely write. She cried as she signed her name on the line, selling my legacy, my sweat and my blood for pennies on the dollar. Good, Gavin said, snatching the paper away. I will fax this over. We get the wire transfer in the morning. He walked out of the room to find a fax machine, leaving his wife sobbing at the kitchen table. I watched it all. I felt a cold rage, but also a grim satisfaction. They had taken the bait. Obsidian Holdings was not a developer. It was me. Or rather, it was a shell company set up by my lawyer, Solomon Gold. Solomon was a man I had known since law school. He was the only lawyer in the city who operated in the daylight but understood the rules of the darkness. He had defended me in '85 when the city tried to seize my garage. He was sharp, ruthless, and loyal. I picked up the secure line in the warden's office and dialed Solomon number. It is me, I said. Luther Solomon's voice was smooth like polished granite. I heard you were a guest of the state. Temporary accommodations, I replied. They just signed the sale agreement. Gavin is faxing it to the number you provided. Excellent, Solomon said. The trap is set. Listen to me, Solomon, I said, leaning into the microphone. Let the sale go through. Let the title transfer to Obsidian Holdings. I want the house out of their names legally, understood. But I added my voice, dropping an octave. Clause 4. Trigger Clause 4 immediately. Solomon chuckled on the other end of the line. Ah, the escrow trap. You are a cruel man, Luther. They wanted the money, I said. Let them see the money. Let them smell it, but do not let them touch a single cent. Clause 4 was a nasty little piece of legal engineering we had designed years ago. It stated that in the event of a sale by a trustee or guardian involving a party declared incompetent, all funds must be held in a blind escrow account for a period of 90 days to clear any potential liens or challenges. Gavin thinks he is getting a wire transfer tomorrow morning, I said. He thinks he can pay off the sharks. He is going to wake up to a frozen account, Solomon confirmed, and by the time the 90 days are up, you will be out and the sharks will have eaten him alive. Exactly, I said. I hung up the phone. On the screen, Gavin was coming back into the kitchen. He looked relieved. He poured himself a drink, ignoring Zoe. He thought he had won. He thought he had outsmarted the system. He had just sold my house to me for a fraction of its value, and he wasn't going to see a dime of the profit. Miller watched me from across the desk. He looked terrified and impressed at the same time. "You are going to let them think they have the money until the morning," Miller asked. I nodded. "Hope is a dangerous thing, Jim," I said. "I want him to sleep soundly tonight. I want him to dream about being rich, because when he wakes up, I want the fall to break him." I looked at the monitor one last time. Gavin was smiling now, counting invisible money. Zoe was staring at the wall, hollowed out. "Enjoy the house tonight, Gavin," I whispered. "It is the last night you will ever sleep under a roof you think you own. Tomorrow the real game begins. Tomorrow I go to court. And I was not going to wear a suit. I was going to wear my prison jumpsuit. I was going to play the part they wrote for me, right until I rewrote the ending. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old lies. I shuffled into the room wearing my bright orange prison jumpsuit, the chains around my ankles rattling with every step. I kept my head down, my chin resting on my chest, and I let my jaw go slack. To the world, I was Luther Banks, the confused, senile old man who had threatened police officers with a rusty gun. To the few people who knew the truth, I was a shark swimming in shallow water, waiting for the right moment to bite. My lawyer, Solomon Gold, sat at the defense table. He did not look at me with pity. He looked at me with the professional detachment of a man who knew the script. He guided me to my chair, his hand firm on my elbow. I sat down heavily, letting out a low, confused moan. I started to tremble, a rhythmic shaking of my right hand that rattled the handcuffs against the wooden table. I let a thin line of saliva pool at the corner of my mouth. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. My pride screamed at me to sit up straight, to look these vultures in the eye, but I forced the lion down. I had to be the lamb. Gavin sat at the plaintiff's table looking like $1 million in a suit bought with credit he did not have. Beside him was his lawyer, a man named Sterling, who had a reputation for burying the elderly in paperwork until they suffocated. They were whispering to each other, sharing small, tight smiles. They looked at me and saw a payday. They saw a broken machine that just needed to be scrapped. "Your Honor." Sterling began standing up and buttoning his jacket. "We are here today because Mr. Banks is no longer capable of managing his own affairs. The incident 2 days ago involving the firearm and the assault on a police officer is clear evidence of his rapid cognitive decline. We are asking for emergency temporary guardianship to be granted to his son-in-law, Mr. Gavin Pierce, to protect the estate and ensure Mr. Banks receives the care he desperately needs." I stared blankly at the table, my hand continuing its fake tremor. I saw Gavin smirk. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his legs. He looked comfortable. He looked like the lord of the manor. He had no idea that the man sitting on the bench, Judge Vance, was a man I had helped get into law school 40 years ago. He had no idea that the game was rigged. I mumbled something incoherent, a string of nonsense words. Solomon patted my arm. "Quiet now, Luther," he said softly, playing his part perfectly. The judge looked over his glasses at me. "Mr. Banks, do you understand why you are here today?" I looked up, my eyes wide and vacant. I blinked slowly. "I want to go home," I whispered in a raspy voice. "Where is Beatrice?" "I want Beatrice." Beatrice had been dead for 10 years. It was the perfect touch. I heard a gasp from the gallery. I knew Zoe was there. I knew she was watching her father disintegrate. "See, Your Honor," Sterling said, gesturing theatrically toward me. "He is asking for his deceased wife. He is completely detached from reality. It is heartbreaking, truly. Mr. Pierce is willing to take on this burden out of love for his father-in-law." Love. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. I let my head drop back down, hiding the flash of pure hatred that must have crossed my eyes. I was acting, but the rage was real. They were stripping me of my dignity in a public court of law, painting me as an invalid to justify their theft. Gavin leaned over to his lawyer and whispered loud enough for me to hear. "Look at him. He is drooling. This is going to be easier than I thought." I focused on the vibration of my hand against the table. I focused on the rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. It was a countdown. Then came the moment that nearly broke me. Sterling called his star witness. "We call Zoe Pierce to the stand." My daughter walked to the witness box. She was wearing a modest dress, her hair pulled back, looking every bit the grieving, concerned daughter. She avoided looking at me. She kept her eyes fixed on the judge or on her hands. She swore on the Bible, the same Bible she used to read from on Sunday mornings when she was a little girl. Mrs. Pierce Sterling asked, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. "Can you describe your father's behavior in recent months?" Zoe took a deep breath. She looked at Gavin. He gave her a subtle nod, a command. "He has been different," Zoe began, her voice trembling. "He forgets things. He forgets names. He leaves the stove on. Last week he got lost walking to the mailbox. Lies. All lies. I had never been sharper. I fixed bicycles with complex gear systems every day. I managed the books for the community center in my head. But then she went further. She crossed a line that I did not think even she would cross. And he has been aggressive," Zoe continued, a tear sliding down her cheek. "He gets angry over nothing. He throws things. When I was a child..." She paused, sobbing for effect. "When I was a child, he used to have these rages. He would hit the walls. Sometimes he would grab me too hard. I was always afraid of him. But now it is worse. He is unpredictable. I am terrified for my safety and for my husband." The air left the room. My own daughter. The girl I had carried on my shoulders. The girl I had protected from the harsh realities of this world. The girl I had never not once raised a hand against. She was painting me as a monster. She was rewriting our history to fit her husband's narrative. I felt a physical pain in my chest sharper than any bullet. This was not just theft. This was murder. She was killing my character. She was killing the memory of her father. I dug my fingernails into my palm under the table. I pressed until the skin broke and I felt the warm trickle of blood. The physical pain gave me something to focus on. It kept me from standing up and roaring the truth. It kept me in my seat. I kept my head down, shaking it, slowly mumbling, "No, no, no." It looked like the confusion of a demented man. In reality, it was the denial of a father who realized his child was gone. "Thank you, Mrs. Pierce," Sterling said softly. "That must have been very hard to say." Zoe stepped down. She walked past my table. For a split second, she looked at me. I raised my head just an inch. Our eyes met. I did not look confused in that second. I looked at her with a cold, dead stare. I saw her flinch. I saw her stumble slightly. She knew. Deep down, she knew she had just sold her soul. Gavin reached out and took her hand as she sat down, patting it reassuringly. He looked triumphant. He had the testimony. He had the medical report. He had the performance. The judge cleared his throat. He looked at the paperwork in front of him. He looked at Gavin. Then he looked at me. Judge Vance had a poker face carved from granite. He picked up his gavel. The sound of the wood hitting the block echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. Based on the evidence presented, Judge Vance said, his voice monotone, "And considering the immediate need for supervision regarding the defendant estate and person, I am granting the motion." Gavin let out a breath he had been holding. He smiled a wide, predatory grin. He squeezed Zoe's shoulder. However, the judge continued. "This is a temporary order. I am granting emergency guardianship to Mr. Gavin Pierce for a period of 30 days. A court-appointed evaluator will review Mr. Banks' condition at the end of that period. 30 days. It was exactly what we needed. It was exactly what I had asked for through my channels. It was enough time for Gavin to feel secure. Enough time for him to make mistakes. Enough time for him to dig his own grave so deep he would never climb out." "Court is adjourned," Vance said. Gavin stood up immediately. He shook his lawyer's hand. He hugged Zoe. He looked like he had just won the lottery. In his mind, he had. He had control of the house, the accounts, the assets. He thought he had 30 days to liquidate everything and run. The bailiffs came to take me back to the transport van. I stood up slowly, my chains rattling. I let the tremor in my hand continue. Gavin walked over to me. He couldn't resist. He had to gloat. He had to twist the knife one last time. He leaned in close, invading my personal space, smelling of victory and expensive cologne. "Do not worry, Dad," Gavin whispered, putting a heavy emphasis on the word. "We will take good care of the house. I might even put in a pool after I sell off your tools. Enjoy the nursing home. I hear the oatmeal is delicious." He laughed softly, a cruel, ugly sound. I stopped shaking. I lifted my head. I straightened my spine, growing 2 inches taller in a second. The fog in my eyes cleared instantly, replaced by a clarity that was sharp as a razor. I looked directly into Gavin's eyes. I saw his smile falter. I saw confusion flicker across his face as the senile old man vanished and the predator appeared. I leaned forward, my chains clinking on the table. 30 days, I whispered. My voice was not raspy. It was deep, steady, and terrifying. 30 days of hell, Gavin. Start counting. Gavin stepped back, his eyes wide. He looked around, but no one else had heard. The bailiffs were just doing their job. Solomon was packing his briefcase. Zoe was looking at the floor. "What did you say?" Gavin stammered. I let my face go slack again. I started the tremor. I looked past him at the wall. "Beatrice," I mumbled. "Is it time for dinner?" Gavin stared at me, his heart racing. He tried to laugh it off, but it sounded nervous. He shook his head. "You are crazy, old man," he said, but his voice lacked its previous confidence. He turned and walked away quickly, grabbing Zoe by the arm and practically dragging her out of the courtroom. I watched him go. I saw the fear in the set of his shoulders. He had felt it, a cold draft from an open grave. The bailiff took my arm. "Let us go, Banks." I shuffled out of the courtroom, back into the chains, back into the cage. But inside I was smiling. Gavin Pierce had his piece of paper. He had his temporary victory. But he had just invited a Trojan horse into his life. He thought he had 30 days to spend my money. He had 30 days to suffer, and I was going to enjoy every single second of it. Gavin Pierce wasted no time in turning my sanctuary into a circus. He had the legal paper in his pocket, the temporary guardianship that acted like a crown on his empty head, and he intended to wear it. Less than 48 hours after the judge banged his gavel, my driveway was filled with leased luxury cars. Porsches, Mercedes, and a few Bentleys that probably cost more to rent for the night than Gavin made in a year. He was throwing a party, not a celebration of life or a housewarming, but a sales pitch disguised as a debauchery. He called it an exclusive investment opportunity gala. I called it a desecration. From my monitors in the solitary confinement block, I watched the parasites descend on my home. These were not friends. They were sharks smelling blood in the water. Real estate developers with shady reputations, hard money lenders looking to launder cash, and women who were paid to laugh at unfunny jokes. The music was so loud the bass rattled the security cameras. My living room, where I had taught Zoe to read, was now a dance floor filled with smoke and the stench of expensive spilled liquor. Gavin stood in the center of it all, holding a crystal tumbler of my best scotch. He had broken the lock on my liquor cabinet. He was wearing a tuxedo that was a little too tight, his face flushed with alcohol and the high of perceived power. "This is just the beginning," I heard him shout over the music to a man with slicked back hair. "The old man is out of the picture. The property is prime. We bulldoze this relic, put up high-density luxury condos, and we triple our money in 6 months. I have the power of attorney. I have the deed. It is a gold mine, boys." He was selling my life's work for parts while standing on my floorboards. But the worst was yet to come. I watched as he led a group of potential investors down the hall. They were laughing, stumbling, treating my home like a conquered territory. They stopped at the door to the guest room. This was Beatrice's room, my wife's sewing room. Since she passed, I had kept it exactly as she left it. Her sewing machine, her fabrics, the quilt she was working on when her heart stopped. It was a shrine to the only woman I ever loved. Gavin kicked the door open. The room had been stripped. The sewing machine was gone. The fabrics were gone. In their place were leather couches and a poker table. The air was thick with cigar smoke. "We turned this into the VIP lounge," Gavin bragged, ashing his cigar on the floor where Beatrice used to pray. "The old lady junk is in the dumpster out back. We needed space for serious business." My blood boiled in my veins. He had thrown away her memory like it was trash. I watched a stranger spill red wine on the carpet, laughing as he tried to wipe it with his shoe. They were animals. They were feasting on the carcass of my life, thinking the lion was dead. Miller sat beside me in the dark observation room. He did not speak. He knew better. He saw the vein throbbing in my temple. He saw my hands clenching and unclenching. "Not yet," I whispered to the screen. "Enjoy your drink, Gavin. It is the last one you will taste without the flavor of fear." The camera angle shifted to the kitchen. Zoe was there. My daughter. The girl who used to run into my arms when thunder scared her. Now she was running from her husband. She was not enjoying the party. She was working it. Gavin had fired the catering staff an hour ago in a fit of arrogance, claiming they were too slow. He had forced Zoe to take over. She was wearing a cocktail dress that was too short, something Gavin had likely picked out to show her off like a trophy. She was carrying a heavy tray of champagne flutes weaving through the crowded room. Zoe looked exhausted. Her makeup was smudged. Her eyes were hollow. A heavy-set man in a gray suit grabbed her arm as she passed. "Hey, sweetheart," the man slurred, leering at her. "Where's the refill? You are empty." Zoe tried to pull away. "Please let go," she said, her voice small. "I am getting more." Gavin appeared out of the crowd. He did not defend his wife. He did not punch the man. He laughed. "Treat her right, Mike," Gavin joked, slapping the man on the back. "She is the help tonight. Zoe, hurry up. Mike Glass is dry. Do not be useless. Get more champagne from the cellar." Zoe looked at her husband. For the first time, the illusion cracked. She saw him not as the ambitious provider, but as the pimp he was becoming. She looked around the kitchen. She looked at the trash can where her mother urn had been dumped. She looked at the strangers destroying her childhood home. "I am your wife, Gavin," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Not your servant. You are whatever I say you are." Gavin hissed, leaning into her face, his charm vanishing instantly. "You signed the papers too, Zoe. You are in this as deep as I am. Now serve the drinks, or so help me God, I will cut you off without a dime. Do you want to be poor like your father?" Zoe flinched. She looked down at the tray in her hands. The shame radiated off her in waves. She turned and walked back to the pantry defeated. She was realizing that she hadn't married a king. She had married a tyrant, and she was just another asset to be liquidated. I turned to Miller. "It is time," I said. Miller picked up his radio. He nodded at me. "Initiate protocol blackout," Miller said into the receiver. I picked up my own phone. It was a burner, untraceable. I dialed a number that had not been used in years. It rang once. "Big Sal," I said. Boss, the voice on the other end, answered immediately. It was a voice like grinding stones. "We are waiting on your word." "The party is over," I said. "Scare the rats. But leave the head rat for me. And Sal, the cars, make them hurt." "Understood, boss." I hung up. I looked back at the screens. Gavin was raising a toast. To the future, he shouted. To the bank's estate. Suddenly, the world went black. Every light in the house died. The music cut out with a dying groan. The sudden silence was heavy, terrifying. The house was plunged into absolute darkness. "Hey," Gavin yelled. "Who hit the switch? Zoe, fix the fuse." Then came the sound. It started low, a rumble from the street, the sound of motorcycles, heavy engines revving, then the sound of glass breaking. A brick flew through the front bay window, shattering the glass. Screams erupted from the guests. The floodlights from the street suddenly flared on, blindingly bright, aimed directly at the house. But they weren't police lights. They were high beams from a dozen trucks parked on the lawn. Shadows moved in the light. They were not boys. They were men. My men. The Brotherhood. They were the people the city forgot, the people I had protected for decades. They wore dark clothes and masks, and they carried baseball bats and crowbars. They did not enter the house. They did not touch the guests. They went for the symbols. I watched on the exterior cameras as Big Sal walked up to a silver Ferrari. He swung a sledgehammer. The sound of the windshield shattering was crisp and beautiful. Panic seized the party. The investors, the sharks, the leeches, they scrambled for the doors. They trampled each other in the dark, screaming, dropping their expensive drinks. "My car," someone screamed. "They are smashing my car. Get out of my way," another yelled. Gavin was running around with his cell phone flashlight trying to restore order. "Stay calm," he shrieked, his voice cracking. "It is just a prank. I will call the police." But he had no signal. I had jammer devices installed years ago. Outside, the destruction was methodical. Paint bombs were thrown. Red paint splattered across the hoods of the luxury cars, looking like blood in the headlights. Tires were slashed. Mirrors were smashed. It was a symphony of chaos. The guests poured out of the front door, running into the night, abandoning their vehicles, abandoning their dignity. They ran past the silent wall of men standing on the sidewalk. My men did not stop them. They just stood there, menacing, silent sentinels of the neighborhood. Within 10 minutes, the house was empty. The investors were gone. The cars were ruined. The party was dead. Gavin stood alone in the center of the living room, illuminated only by the beam of his flashlight. He was breathing hard, spinning in circles. "Who are you?" he screamed into the darkness. "Show yourselves. Do you know who I am? I own this town." A rock sailed through the broken window and landed at his feet. Attached to it was a note. Gavin picked it up. He unfolded it with trembling hands. He shined his light on the paper. The note read, "You own nothing. You are a tenant, and rent is due." Gavin crumpled the note. He looked around the empty, dark house. He looked at the wreckage of his gala. He realized in that moment that he was not fighting a senile old man. He was fighting a ghost. Zoe was cowering at the kitchen corner, crying. Gavin did not go to her. He threw his glass against the wall, shattering it. "This isn't over," he screamed at the empty room. "I will sell this place. I will burn it down if I have to." I watched him from my cell. I took a sip of water. "No, son," I whispered. "You won't burn it down because you need the money. And now you have no investors, you have no friends, and the clock is ticking." My phone buzzed. It was a text from the loan shark monitoring Gavin. "Payment due in 48 hours. Or we take a finger." I smiled. The party was over. But the hangover was going to be lethal. The morning after the blackout, the sun did not rise in my house. It crept through the shattered windows, illuminating the wreckage of Gavin's failed gala. Broken glass glittered on the hardwood like diamonds. Red paint stained the driveway. The smell of stale champagne and fear hung in the air. I watched on the monitor as Gavin paced the living room. He was not wearing his tuxedo anymore. He was wearing jeans and a stained t-shirt, his eyes bloodshot and wild. He looked like a trapped animal gnawing on its own leg. Zoe was cleaning up the debris, sweeping glass into a pile. She moved slowly, favoring her left side. She looked terrified. "You are useless," Gavin muttered, kicking an overturned chair. Zoe flinched. "I am trying." "Gavin," she whispered, "I am trying to clean up." "Clean up?" Gavin screamed, spinning on her. "You cannot clean this up, Zoe. You ruined it, you and your crazy father." He crossed the room in 2 strides. He grabbed her by the hair, yanking her head back. I stood up in the command center, my fist slamming onto the desk. Miller reached for the radio, but I stopped him. We could not intervene yet. Not if we wanted the checkmate. "It was your job to keep the old man happy," Gavin hissed into her face. "It was your job to find the money. And now look at us. The investors are gone. The cars are destroyed. And Silas wants his money by midnight." He threw her to the ground. Zoe landed hard, her shoulder hitting the floor. She cried out, but she did not fight back. She curled into a ball, protecting her face. "Please, Gavin," she sobbed. "I do not know what to do." "I do," Gavin said, his voice dropping to a terrifying calm. "I found something else in the safe, something I missed last night because I was too busy looking at the debt." He pulled a crumpled document from his back pocket. It was a deed, an old yellowed property deed for a plot of land on the outskirts of the city, my ancestral land. The land my grandfather bought when he was freed. The land I was saving to build a community center for the neighborhood kids. "I had the appraisal done this morning," Gavin said, waving the paper. "Do you know what this dirt is worth, Zoe? It is zoned for industrial use now. A chemical company wants it. $5 million. Zoe looked up, her eyes widening. $5 million. "Yes," Gavin said. "But there is a problem. The deed is in a trust, a specific trust that requires a signature from the primary beneficiary to sell. That is your father." He crouched down in front of her, grabbing her chin. "You are going to go to the prison," Gavin ordered. "You are going to visit the old man. You are going to cry. You are going to tell him you miss him. And you are going to get him to sign this release form." "I cannot," Zoe whimpered. He knows we put him there. Make him sign it," Gavin roared, raising his hand. "Or I swear on my life, Zoe, I will give you to Silas as a down payment. Do you understand me?" Zoe nodded, tears streaming down her face. She was broken. She was terrified. But she was still willing to do his dirty work. "Go!" Gavin shouted, pointing at the door. "Do not come back without that signature." I watched her run out of the house, clutching her purse. She was coming to me, not to save me, not to apologize, but to rob me one last time. Miller looked at me. "Do you want to see her boss?" "Yes," I said, sitting back down. "Set it up. General visitation. I want the glass between us. I want her to see exactly where she put me." An hour later, I sat in the visitation booth. The room was cold, sterile, and smelled of despair. I wore my orange jumpsuit, the number printed on my chest. I sat with my hands folded on the metal ledge, waiting. Zoe walked in. She looked terrible. She had put on makeup to cover the bruise on her cheek, but it was poorly done. Her eyes were swollen. She walked with a limp. She sat down on the other side of the thick plexiglass. She picked up the phone. Her hand was trembling. I picked up my receiver. I did not say hello. I just looked at her. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I am not your daddy," I said, my voice flat. "I am inmate 8940. That is what you made me." Zoe burst into tears. It was a performance I had seen 1,000 times since she was a teenager, but this time there was real fear behind it. "Daddy, please listen to me," she sobbed, pressing her hand against the glass. "I am so sorry. I did not want to do it. Gavin made me. He is crazy, Daddy. He hits me." She tilted her head, showing me the bruise. She was using her pain as currency, trying to buy my sympathy. "He beat me this morning," she cried. "He says he will kill me if I do not get the money. We are in so much trouble." I looked at the bruise. It pained me. It truly did. No father wants to see his child hurt. But then I remembered the urn in the trash can. I remembered the signature on the commitment papers. "You chose him, Zoe," I said. "You stood in my living room and watched them put me in cuffs. You signed the paper that said I was crazy." "I was scared," she pleaded. "I am scared now. Please, Daddy, help me. We can fix this." "How?" I asked. "How do we fix this, Zoe?" She reached into her purse and pulled out the document. She flattened it against the glass. It was the transfer of authority for the land trust. "Sign this," she said, her eyes desperate. "It is the land in the bottoms. It is worth millions, Daddy. If you sign this, we can sell it. We can pay off Gavin debts. We can start over." "Start over," I repeated. "Yes," she said, nodding eagerly. "We can pay everyone off. I will leave him, Daddy, I promise. I will take the money and we can go away. You and me, just like before. We can buy a new house." I looked at her. I looked deep into her eyes, searching for the little girl who used to bring me lemonade while I worked on cars. I searched for a shred of honesty, but all I saw was greed. She wasn't going to leave him. She was going to take the money and give it to the monster who beat her because she was too weak to walk away. She was trying to sell my grandfather's legacy to a chemical plant to save her own skin. "You want to sell the land?" I asked. "The land I promised to the community. The land your mother loved. Mom is dead." Zoe snapped, her patience fraying. "And we are alive. We need the money. Do you want me to die? Do you want Gavin to kill me?" "You are not listening, Zoe," I said softly. "I am listening," she screamed, hitting the glass. "Sign the paper, old man. Stop being so stubborn. It is just dirt. It is $5 million. There it was. The mask slipped. The victim vanished and the predator appeared. "You do not get it," I said, leaning closer to the glass. "I am not signing anything." Zoe froze. "What?" I said. "No," I replied. "I am not selling the land. I am not paying Gavin debts. And I am not saving you." Zoe's stare turned venomous. Her face twisted into an ugly snarl. The tears stopped instantly. "You selfish old bastard," she hissed. I sat back, crossing my arms. "I gave you everything, Zoe. I gave you life. I gave you a home. I gave you an education. And you sold me out for a man who treats you like a dog." "He treats me like a dog because we are poor," she screamed, her voice echoing in the small booth. "Because you sat on a fortune and made us live like peasants. You could have given us this money years ago." "It wasn't yours to take," I said. "You are going to rot in here," she shouted, standing up. "Do you hear me? I will leave you in here until you die. I will tell the doctors you are getting worse. I will make sure you never see the sun again." I looked at her calmly. I touched the ring on my finger. "You can try," I said, "but you are forgetting one thing, Zoe." "What?" she spat. "I am the one who knocks," I said, "and the door is already opening." Zoe slammed the receiver against the wall. She grabbed her purse and the unsigned deed. "I hate you," she screamed. "I hate you. I hope they bury you in a pauper grave." She turned and stormed out of the visitation room, leaving me alone in the silence. I watched her go. I felt a piece of my heart die a final withering death. My daughter was gone. The woman who walked out of that room was a stranger who wanted me dead. Miller stepped out from the shadows in the corner of the room. He had been watching. "I am sorry," Boss Miller said quietly. "Do not be," I said, standing up. "Clarity is a gift, Jim. even when it hurts. I looked at the empty chair where my daughter had sat. She made her choice, I said. Now she has to live with it. I turned to the warden. Get Solomon on the phone, I said. Gavin is desperate. He failed to get the signature. He is going to try something stupid. What do you think he will do? Miller asked. He is a forger, I said. He forged the medical records. Now he is going to forge the deed. And when he does, we will be waiting. I walked back to my cell, back to my command center. I had no daughter anymore. I had no son-in-law. I had only targets. And the hunt was entering its final phase. Gavin Pierce was a man running out of time and out of options. The loan shark Silas had given him a deadline that was approaching like a freight train, and my refusal to sign the deed had derailed his easy escape plan. I watched him on the monitors in my command center deep within the prison. He was in his office surrounded by crumbled papers and empty scotch bottles. He was not grieving. He was plotting. He picked up his phone and dialed a number I recognized immediately. It was a number that belonged to a man known on the streets as Silk. Silk was the best forger in the state. He could replicate a signature with a single glance and create documents that would fool a federal judge. What Gavin did not know was that Silk had been on my payroll for 20 years. I listened as Gavin made the arrangement. He sounded frantic. He offered Silk $5,000 for a rush job. He needed my signature on the deed transfer, and he needed a biometric thumbprint verification. It was a felony of the highest order, but Gavin was past the point of caring about the law. He was fighting for his life. An hour later, Silk arrived at my house. He played the part perfectly, wearing a cheap suit and carrying a briefcase full of high-tech equipment. I watched as Gavin led him into the study, the same room where he had cut open my safe. Can you do it? Gavin asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. The old man has a shaky hand, but his signature is distinctive. Silk looked at the sample Gavin provided. It was an old birthday card I had signed for Zoe. It pained me to see it used as a template for my own destruction. Easy, Silk said, his voice calm and professional. I can ghost this in 10 minutes, but the thumbprint is harder. I need a source. Gavin ran to the kitchen and came back with a drinking glass I had used days before the arrest. It was still sitting in the sink, unwashed. He drank from this, Gavin said. Can you lift it? Silk examined the glass. He pulled out a scanner and a laptop. He nodded. I can build a synthetic print from this. Silk lied, smooth as oil. It will pass the notary digital scan, but it will cost you extra. Name your price, Gavin said, desperate. Just get it done. I need that deed notarized by tonight. I sat in the darkness of my cell block watching my son-in-law commit a federal crime. He was forging my identity, stealing my name, and selling my legacy. He thought he was buying his freedom, but he was actually buying a one-way ticket to a prison cell right next to mine. Silk scanned the glass, capturing the print, but he wasn't just building a fake thumbprint. He was recording the entire transaction on a button camera on his lapel, sending the feed directly to my lawyer, Solomon Gold. The forgery was complete in 40 minutes. Gavin held the document up to the light, his eyes gleaming with a sick mixture of relief and greed. It was a perfect counterfeit. To the naked eye, I had signed away my birthright. You are a lifesaver, Gavin told Silk, handing him a thick envelope of cash. Silk took the money and tipped his hat. Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Pierce. As Silk left the house, I picked up the phone and called Solomon. Did you get it? I asked. Every frame, Solomon replied, his voice grim. We have him on forgery, identity theft, and fraud. We can bury him now, Luther. Not yet, I said, watching Gavin pour himself another drink on the monitor. He has the deed, but he has not made the sale yet. I want to know who the buyer is. I want to know who is desperate enough to buy a $5 million property in cash overnight. It did not take long to find out. Gavin made another call. This time he put it on speakerphone so he could type on his laptop at the same time. It is done, Gavin said to the person on the other line. I have the signature and the biometric seal. We can close tomorrow morning. Excellent, a deep, raspy voice replied. My partners at Apex Industrial are very pleased. We have been looking for a disposal site in that district for years. I froze. Apex Industrial. I knew that name. Everyone in the neighborhood knew that name. They were a chemical processing conglomerate notorious for cutting corners. They didn't build community centers or parks. They built toxic waste transfer stations. They looked for low-income neighborhoods occupied by minorities, neighborhoods they thought wouldn't fight back, and they turned them into dumping grounds for industrial sludge. They want the land for a waste plant, I whispered, horror rising in my throat. Gavin laughed on the screen. Yeah. Well, it is perfect for you guys, he said. Nobody cares about that neighborhood. It is just a bunch of old houses and poor people. The property values are going to tank once you put the incinerator in, but I will be long gone by then." My hand clenched into a fist so tight my knuckles cracked. He wasn't just selling the land, he was selling out the entire community. He was going to poison the air my neighbors breathed. He was going to dump toxins next to the elementary school where I volunteered. He was going to destroy the legacy my grandfather built not just for me but for everyone who lived there. Zoe walked into the room. She heard the conversation. She looked pale. "Gavin," she said, her voice trembling. "An incinerator. That will ruin the neighborhood. People will get sick. Mrs. Higgins lives right next door to that lot. The kids play there." "Who cares?" Gavin snapped, hanging up the phone. "We are getting $5 million, Zoe. We are moving to the coast. Let them breathe smoke. It is not our problem anymore." Zoe looked at him, and for a moment I thought she might fight. I thought she might remember the values I taught her. I thought she might remember the asthma she had as a child and how hard we fought for clean air. But she didn't. She looked down at her shoes. "Okay," she whispered, "as long as we get the money." That was the final straw, the drop of water that broke the dam. There was no redemption for her. There was no going back. They were willing to burn down the world to warm their own hands. Warden Miller walked into the observation room. He had a file in his hand, but he stopped when he saw my face. He saw the cold fury radiating off me like heat from a furnace. "What is it?" Boss Miller asked. "They are selling the bottoms," I said, my voice low and steady, "to Apex. They are going to put a toxic waste plant in the middle of my neighborhood." Miller dropped the file. "Apex. My mother lives 2 blocks from there. That will kill the whole area." "Gavin says nobody cares," I said, standing up. "He says we are just poor people. He thinks we are trash." I looked at the monitor one last time. Gavin was celebrating, dancing around the room with the forged deed. He looked like a man who had conquered the world. "He is wrong," Miller said, his jaw set. I turned away from the screens. I was done watching. I was done waiting. The time for gathering evidence was over. The time for judgment had arrived. I unzipped the orange prison jumpsuit. I peeled it off, letting it fall to the floor in a heap of bright fabric. I stood there in my undershirt, the scars on my arms visible in the dim light. I did not look like a prisoner anymore. I looked like a warrior preparing for battle. "Open the gate, Jim," I said. Miller nodded. He did not ask questions. He did not hesitate. He walked to the locker in the corner of the room and opened it. Inside, hanging in a plastic bag, was a black Italian suit. My suit. The one Miller had retrieved from my tailor downtown while I was in the cell. Beside it was a pair of polished leather shoes and a silk tie. I dressed in silence. I put on the white shirt, buttoning it to the collar. I tied the tie with a perfect Windsor knot. I stepped into the trousers and slipped on the jacket. It fit like armor. I sat down and put on the shoes, tying the laces tight. When I stood up, I was no longer inmate 894. I was Luther Banks. The man who had run these streets before Gavin Pierce was even born. Miller handed me a heavy ebony walking cane with a silver lion head handle. It was not just for walking, it was a symbol. And a weapon. "Your car is waiting in the Sallyport," Miller said. "My best men are driving. Solomon is meeting us at the hotel." I took the cane. I felt the weight of it in my hand. It felt good. It felt like justice. "Where are they signing the deal?" I asked. "The Grand Hotel," Miller replied. "The ballroom. 10 a.m. I checked my watch. We had an hour. "Let us go," I said, walking toward the door. "It is time to hunt." We walked out of the solitary block. The guards we passed snapped to attention, not because I was an inmate, but because they knew exactly who was walking down their hallway. I walked through the main gates, the heavy steel bars sliding open with a groan. The sun hit my face for the first time in days. It was bright. It was clean. A black Rolls-Royce was idling in the courtyard. The driver got out and opened the door. I slid into the back seat. Miller got in beside me. "Take us to the Grand," the warden ordered. "And do not stop for red lights." The car surged forward. I looked out the window at the city passing by. I saw the streets I had paved. I saw the businesses I had funded. I saw the people I had protected. Gavin thought he could sell them out. He thought he could poison them for a payday. He was about to find out that this city had antibodies, and I was the cure. "Get ready, Gavin," I whispered, touching the silver ring on my finger. "The landlord is coming to collect. An eviction is going to be painful." The Grand Hotel ballroom was a cathedral of crystal and velvet. It smelled of fresh lilies and old money. In the center of the room sat a long mahogany table covered in white linen. On it lay the forged deed to my ancestral land and a fountain pen that cost more than my first car. Gavin sat at the head of the table. He looked like a man who had just conquered a kingdom. His suit was crisp, and his hair was perfectly styled. He held a crystal flute of champagne in one hand and the pen in the other. Beside him sat Zoe. She was pale and her hands were trembling, but she was there. She was drinking the champagne. She had made her choice. Across from them sat 3 men from Apex Industrial. They looked like sharks in human skin. They wore gray suits and dead smiles. They were not there to build a park. They were there to build a poison factory. Mr. Pierce, the lead executive, said, his voice smooth as oil, "This is a historic day. With this acquisition, Apex will finally have the processing capacity we need for the tri-state area. The incinerator will be online within 18 months. Gavin laughed. It was a loud, ugly sound that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "Just make sure the check clears before the first truck rolls in. I plan to be on a beach in the Cayman Islands before the smoke starts rising." He leaned forward and signed the document. The scratch of the nib against the paper was the sound of a guillotine blade dropping on my neighborhood. "Done," Gavin announced, capping the pen. "The property is yours. Do whatever you want with it. Burn it, bury it. I do not care." Zoe flinched. She took a large gulp of champagne, trying to drown her conscience. "To wealth," Gavin shouted, raising his glass. "To freedom. And to the old man rotting in a cell who made this all possible." The executives laughed. They clinked their glasses. The sound was like breaking bones. I watched them from the hallway. I adjusted my silk tie. I felt the cool weight of the ebony cane in my hand. I looked at Miller. I looked at Solomon. I looked at the 12 men standing behind me. They were not just bodyguards. They were the sons of the men I had led 30 years ago. They were the new generation of the Brotherhood. "Are you ready, Mr. Banks?" Solomon asked. "I am not Mr. Banks today." "Solomon," I said. "Today I am the landlord, and I am here to serve an eviction notice." I nodded to the doormen. They were big men, but they looked at my entourage and stepped aside without a word. "Open it," I said. The double doors to the ballroom did not just open. They were thrown wide with a force that shook the chandeliers. The wood slammed against the walls with a thunderous boom that stopped every heart in the room. The laughter died instantly. The silence that followed was absolute. I stepped into the room. I was not wearing the orange jumpsuit of inmate 8942. I was wearing a black Italian suit cut to perfection, fitting my broad shoulders like armor. My shirt was white as snow. My shoes were polished to a mirror shine. On my right hand, the silver ring with the lion crest caught the light of the chandeliers. I did not walk like a senile old man. I walked with the rhythm of a predator. I took a step and brought the silver-tipped cane down on the marble floor. Click, step, click, step, click, click. Behind me, Solomon Gold walked with a briefcase full of ruin, and behind him 12 men in dark suits filed into the room, forming a wall of muscle and menace. They crossed their arms and stared at the table. Gavin dropped his champagne glass. It shattered on the floor, spraying glass and expensive liquid over his shoes. He stared at me, his mouth hanging open. He blinked rapidly as if trying to clear a hallucination. Zoe gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. She looked from me to the entourage and back to me. She saw the suit. She saw the cane. She saw the eyes of a man she did not recognize. "Who is this?" the Apex executive demanded, standing up. "This is a private meeting." "Security!" Gavin stood up, knocking his chair over. His face went from shock to terror and then to a desperate, furious panic. "He escaped!" Gavin screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. He broke out. "Call the police. Somebody call the police. That man is a fugitive. He is dangerous." I stopped 10 feet from the table. I rested both hands on the head of my cane. I looked Gavin up and down. I looked at the wet stain on his trousers where he had spilled his drink. "Hello, Gavin," I said. My voice was low, but it carried to every corner of the room. "I see you started the party without me. Again. You are supposed to be in a cell," Gavin yelled, his voice cracking. "You are crazy. You are incompetent. I have the papers. I am your guardian. You cannot be here." He fumbled for his phone, his fingers clumsy with fear. He dialed 911. "Officer, send units to the Grand Hotel immediately," Gavin shouted into the phone. "An inmate has escaped. He is armed. He is violent. He is threatening me. Hurry." I waited. I did not move. I let him make the call. I let him dig the hole a little deeper. The Apex executives were gathering their papers, looking nervous. "Mr. Pierce, what is the meaning of this? Is this the cellar? You told us he was incapacitated." "He is," Gavin shrieked. "He is senile. He does not know where he is. This sale is legal. I have the power of attorney. Ignore him." "He is not senile," the executive said, looking at me. "He looks like he owns the place." Gavin ran around the table, putting himself between me and the buyers. He tried to look imposing, but he looked like a child standing in front of a tank. "Get out, old man," Gavin hissed. "Go back to the prison before they shoot you down in the street. You are ruining everything." I smiled. It was a cold, hard smile. "I am not ruining anything, Gavin," I said. "I am fixing it." Sirens wailed in the distance. They got closer and closer until they stopped right outside the hotel entrance. Blue and red lights flashed through the windows. Gavin let out a laugh of relief. He thought the cavalry had arrived. He thought the system was coming to save him. "They are here," he gloated. "You are done, Luther. They're going to put you in a hole so deep you will never see the sky again. You should have stayed put. Now you are going to die in chains." The ballroom doors opened again. A squad of police officers marched in. Leading them was a man in a white shirt with gold stars on his collar, the chief of police, Chief Washington. He was a stern man, a man who did not smile. He walked with purpose, his hand resting on his service weapon. Gavin ran to him. "Chief, thank God. Arrest him. He is a fugitive. He escaped from the county holding facility. He is dangerous." Gavin pointed at me, his finger trembling. "Take him down. Use force if you have to." Chief Washington stopped. He looked at Gavin. He looked at the spilled champagne. He looked at the terrified executives. Then he looked at me. He walked past Gavin. He walked right up to me. He did not pull his gun. He did not reach for his cuffs. He extended his hand. "Mr. Banks." Chief Washington said, his voice respectful, "It has been a long time." I took his hand. It was a firm handshake, the handshake of two men who understood power. "Too long, Chief," I replied. "I trust your family as well." "They are thanks to you," the chief said. "My grandson just finished college. That scholarship fund you set up anonymously years ago changed his life." Gavin made a sound like a dying animal. He staggered back, hitting the table. "What is happening?" Gavin whispered. "You know him. He is a criminal. He is my ward. I have a court order." Chief Washington turned slowly to face Gavin. The look of contempt on his face could have peeled paint. "Mr. Banks is not a criminal," the chief said. "He is a pillar of this community. And as for your court order, it seems there has been a development." "What development?" Gavin stammered. I stepped forward. The sound of my cane on the marble was the only sound in the room. "The development, Gavin, is that the lion does not ask permission from the sheep to walk in his own territory." I looked at the Apex executives. "This meeting is over," I said. "The land is not for sale. Not today. Not ever." The executives looked at Gavin, then at the chief of police, then at me. They were businessmen. They knew when a deal was dead. They packed their briefcases in silence and walked out without looking back. Gavin watched them go. He watched $5 million walk out the door. He watched his salvation disappear. He turned to me. His face was twisted with madness. The reality of his situation was crashing down on him. The debt, the lies, the forgery. "You cannot do this," he screamed, pulling at his hair. "I am the guardian. I am in charge." I looked at Solomon. "Show him Solomon," I said. Solomon stepped forward. He opened his briefcase. He did not take out a defense strategy. He took out a remote control. He pointed it at the large projection screen that had been set up for the Apex presentation. "Let us look at your guardianship," Gavin Solomon said. The screen flickered to life, but it did not show property maps or profit projections. It showed a video. It was the video from my house, the video Silk had recorded with his button camera. It showed Gavin in high definition handing over the cash. It showed him providing the glass for the fingerprint. It showed him laughing about forging my signature. "I can ghost this in 10 minutes, Silk voice said from the speakers booming through the ballroom. Gavin's face went white. He looked at the screen, then at me. That is fake," he stuttered. "Deep fake. AI. It is not real." Solomon clicked the remote again. A new video played. It was an audio recording this time, accompanied by a transcript on the screen. It was Gavin's voice, clear as day, talking to Zoe in the kitchen. "Once we sell the land, I will inject the old man," Gavin's voice said. "An overdose. Insulin. They will think his heart gave out. He is worth more dead than alive anyway." Zoe screamed. She covered her ears. "No, no, no," she wailed, sliding down to the floor. The room went cold. This wasn't just fraud. This was conspiracy to commit capital murder. Chief Washington stepped forward, his hand moving to his handcuffs. "Gavin Pierce," he said, "you are under arrest." Gavin looked around wildly. He was cornered. The investors were gone. The police were against him. His wife was broken, and I was standing there, the architect of his destruction. He snapped. He grabbed a steak knife from the banquet table. It was sharp serrated, meant for cutting prime rib. "Back off," he screamed, swinging the knife. "Stay back or I will kill her." He grabbed Zoe. He hauled her up from the floor, wrapping his arm around her neck. He pressed the knife to her throat. A thin line of red appeared on her skin. "Daddy, help me!" Zoe shrieked, her eyes bulging with terror. Gavin dragged her backward toward the service exit. "I am leaving," he shouted. "I am taking the car. I am taking her. Anyone follows me and I open her throat." The police officers drew their weapons. "Drop the knife," the chief shouted. "No," Gavin yelled, spitting foam. "I need the money. I need a way out." I watched him. I watched the coward use my daughter as a human shield. I did not draw a weapon. I did not step back. I walked toward him. Tap, click, tap, click. "Stop." Gavin screamed. "Stay away, old man. I will do it, I swear." I looked him in the eye. I saw the fear. I saw the weakness. "You think you are holding a hostage, Gavin?" I said, my voice calm. "But you are holding a liability." I stopped 3 feet from him. The knife was trembling against Zoe's skin. "Look around you, son," I said, spreading my arms. "You are in a room full of police. You are on camera. And you are threatening the daughter of Luther Banks." I took another step. "You think you are a wolf," I whispered. "But you are just a dog who caught a car. And now the wheels are going to crush you." Gavin's hand shook violently. He looked at the door, then at me. I have to go," he whimpered. I raised my cane. I pointed the silver lion head directly at his face. "Let her go," I said, "or you leave this room in a bag." Gavin hesitated. For a second I thought he might drop the knife, but then his eyes glazed over. The madness took hold. He tightened his grip. "Say goodbye to your daughter," he hissed, raising the knife for a killing stroke. He never finished the motion. From the shadows of the balcony above, a single shot rang out. Crack! Gavin screamed. His hand, the one holding the knife, exploded in a mist of red. The knife clattered to the floor. He fell back, releasing Zoe, clutching his ruined hand. I looked up. Warden Miller was standing on the mezzanine, a sniper rifle in his hands. He nodded at me once. Zoe crawled away, sobbing. Police swarmed Gavin, pinning him to the ground. I walked over to him. He was writhing in pain, crying like a child. I looked down at him. "I told you, Gavin," I said. 30 days of hell, and we are just getting started." The silence in the ballroom was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a held breath before the executioner drops the blade. Gavin Pierce stood by the table, trembling like a leaf in a storm, his eyes darting between the police chief and the exit signs. He looked at me, and he saw his end, but he was too arrogant to accept it. He opened his mouth to speak, to spin another web of lies, to claim that I was an imposter or a hallucination. But Solomon Gold did not give him the chance. My lawyer stepped into the center of the room, moving with the slow, deliberate grace of a man who knows he holds all the aces. He placed his briefcase on the table, right next to the unsigned check that was supposed to buy my family heritage. He did not look at Gavin. He looked at the projection screen that dominated the back wall. "Ladies and gentlemen," Solomon said, his voice booming without the need for a microphone, "you have heard Mr. Pierce claim that he is the legal guardian of Luther Banks. You have heard him claim that he acts in the best interest of the estate. You have heard him claim that he is a loving son-in-law trying to manage a difficult situation." Solomon paused. He pulled a small remote control from his pocket. "Now let us look at the truth." He pressed a button. The massive screen behind Gavin flickered to life. The image was crystal clear, high-definition footage taken from a hidden camera. It showed the interior of my study, the room Gavin had claimed as his own. On the screen, Gavin was sitting at my desk. He was not alone. He was with a man known on the streets as Silk a Forger, who could copy the signature of a dead man for the right price. I cannot get the loop on the B right, Gavin was saying on the video, his voice frustrated and whiny. The old man has a tremor. It needs to look shaky. Just trace it. Silk replied, his voice calm. Do not overthink it. Once we seal it with the notary stamp, nobody is going to question it. He is in the system as mentally incompetent. Who is going to believe him over a piece of paper? Gavin laughed on the screen. It was a cruel sound. You are right. Once this deed is signed, I am $5 million richer and Luther is just a statistic. The real Gavin standing in the ballroom turned pale. He looked at the screen, watching himself commit a felony. He looked at the Apex executives who were staring at him with a mixture of horror and disgust. That is deep fake, Gavin stammered, pointing at the screen, his hand shaking so hard he could barely keep it level. That is AI. It is not real. He generated that. Solomon did not even blink. He pressed the button again. The video cut out, replaced by a black screen with a waveform audio visualization. If the video is not to your liking, Mr. Pierce, perhaps you will recognize your own voice in this audio recording, Solomon said. This was recorded yesterday evening in the kitchen of the bank's residence. He played the file. The sound quality was perfect. It was Gavin speaking to Zoe. We sell the land tomorrow, Gavin's voice said, cold and devoid of any humanity. We get the cash wire transfer, and then we deal with the problem permanently. What do you mean deal with it? Zoe's voice asked, sounding scared. I mean, we end it, Gavin replied. He is old, Zoe. His heart is weak. One injection of insulin mixed with his blood pressure meds and he goes to sleep forever. The coroner will write it off as natural causes. He is worth more dead than alive anyway. Besides, I am tired of waiting for nature to take its course. The audio ended. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Zoe let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. She covered her ears, shaking her head violently. She collapsed to the floor, her expensive dress pooling around her like a shroud. She looked up at Gavin with eyes wide with terror. You were going to kill him, she whispered, her voice echoing in the quiet room. You told me we were just selling the land. You told me he would be safe in a home. You were going to murder my father. Gavin backed away from her. He looked at the police chief. He looked at the executives. He looked at me. There was no way out. The evidence was irrefutable. It wasn't just fraud anymore. It was conspiracy to commit capital murder. I stood there leaning on my cane, watching the color drain from his world. I felt no pity. I felt only the cold, hard weight of justice. The executives from Apex Industrial were the first to move. They were men who dealt in toxic waste and backroom deals, but even they had lines they would not cross. Murder and public exposure were bad for business. The lead executive stood up. He grabbed his briefcase, clutching it to his chest like a shield. He looked at Gavin with pure contempt. Mr. Pierce, the executive said, his voice icy. Consider our offer rescinded. Apex Industrial does not do business with criminals. Do not contact us again. Wait! Gavin shouted, lunging toward them. You cannot leave. We have a deal. I signed the paper. The land is yours. Just give me the money. The executive sidestepped him easily. The paper is worthless, the executive spat. And so are you. He signaled to his colleagues. They moved as a pack, heading for the double doors with a speed that spoke of years of avoiding subpoenas. Gavin tried to block their path. Please listen to me, he begged, grabbing the sleeve of the lead executive. I can explain. That recording is out of context. I can lower the price. 4 million. 3 million. Just give me something. I need the cash today. The executive shoved him away. Gavin stumbled and fell, hitting the floor hard. He looked up, watching the backs of the men who were supposed to be his saviors as they walked out the door. He scrambled to his feet. He looked around the room, wild-eyed. The police officers were unholstering their weapons. Chief Washington was stepping forward, handcuffs gleaming in his hand. My bodyguards had formed a perimeter blocking the exits. Gavin Pierce, Chief Washington said, his voice booming. You are under arrest for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit murder. Get on your knees and put your hands behind your head. Gavin looked at the chief. He looked at the open door where the money had gone. He looked at his phone, which was vibrating on the table, likely a message from the loan shark Silas telling him time was up. He started to hyperventilate. He was trapped. The walls were closing in. He realized that if he went to jail, he would not survive. The debts he owed on the street would follow him inside. He was a dead man walking. No, he whispered, shaking his head. No, I am not going to prison. I am not going down for this old man. He looked around for a weapon, for an exit, for anything. His eyes landed on the banquet table, specifically on the silver carving station where a large serrated steak knife lay next to a prime rib roast. Gavin lunged. He grabbed the knife. The blade was 8 inches long, sharp enough to slice through muscle and bone. "Stop," the chief shouted, drawing his service weapon. "Drop the knife, Pierce." Gavin did not drop it. He turned. His eyes were not human anymore. They were the eyes of a cornered rat. He looked at me, but I was surrounded by 12 men who would tear him apart before he got within 10 feet. Then he looked at Zoe. She was still on the floor, sobbing, her face buried in her hands. She was defenseless. She was close. Gavin moved before anyone could react. He grabbed a handful of Zoe hair and yanked her to her feet. She screamed a high, piercing sound of absolute terror. He wrapped his arm around her neck, dragging her backward. He pressed the serrated edge of the knife against her throat. A thin line of red blood appeared instantly on her pale skin. "Back off," Gavin shrieked, spitting foam. "Stay back or I will open her up. I swear to God, I will do it." The room froze. The police officers held their fire, aiming their weapons, but unable to shoot without hitting Zoe. "Daddy, help me!" Zoe screamed, her eyes bulging. "He is going to kill me!" I felt a spike of adrenaline hit my system. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was not part of the plan. I wanted him broken. I wanted him jailed. I did not want my daughter bleeding out on a ballroom floor. Gavin dragged her toward the service entrance behind the head table. He was using her body as a shield. "I need a car!" Gavin yelled, his voice cracking with hysteria. "I want a car out back with the engine running, and I want the money. Luther, give me the money. Transfer it now, or your daughter dies." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had eaten at my table, who had slept under my roof, who had promised to protect my child. I saw the madness in him. He was not bluffing. He had nothing left to lose. I stepped forward, pushing past Solomon. "Stay back," Chief Washington warned me. "Luther, do not engage." I ignored him. I walked until I was 10 feet away from Gavin. I stopped. I rested both hands on my cane. I looked him dead in the eye. "Let her go, Gavin," I said, my voice low and dangerous. Gavin laughed, a manic, high-pitched giggle. "Or, what, old man? You will hit me with your stick. Transfer the money. I know you have it. I know about the offshore accounts. Give me $2 million and I let her live." I looked at Zoe. She was looking at me, pleading. I saw the regret in her eyes. I saw the realization that she had thrown away a lifetime of love for a man who was now holding a knife to her throat. "I do not negotiate with terrorists," I said calmly. "And I certainly do not negotiate with failed real estate agents who beat their wives." Gavin tightened his grip. Zoe gasped, clawing at his arm. "I will do it!" Gavin screamed, pressing the knife harder. "Do not test me, Luther. I will kill her, and then I will kill you." "You need that money, Gavin," I said, taking a slow step forward. "You need it to pay Silas. You need it to pay the Russians. If you kill her, you get nothing. If you kill her, you die here in this room." Gavin's hand shook. He knew I was right. But panic is not rational. "I am leaving," he shouted, dragging Zoe backward again. "Get out of my way." He was moving toward the kitchen doors. Once he got in there, he could barricade himself. He could hurt her. He could disappear. I looked up toward the mezzanine level of the ballroom. It was dark up there, shadowed by the heavy curtains. But I knew who was there. I had placed him there myself an hour ago, just in case. I looked back at Gavin. "You made a mistake, son," I said. "What mistake?" Gavin snarled. "You forgot who you were stealing from," I whispered. I raised my cane. I pointed the silver lion head directly at Gavin's face. It was the signal. "Drop it, Gavin," I said. "Last chance." Gavin sneered. "Go to hell, old man." He raised the knife, pulling it away from Zoe's neck for a fraction of a second, preparing to plunge it down into her chest. He never finished the motion. A single gunshot cracked through the air. It was a dry, sharp sound like a whip crack. Gavin screamed. His right hand, the one holding the knife, exploded in a mist of red. A high-caliber round from a sniper rifle had passed clean through his wrist, shattering the bone and severing the tendons. The knife clattered to the marble floor. Gavin fell back, releasing Zoe, clutching his ruined hand to his chest. He howled in agony, dropping to his knees. Zoe scrambled away, crawling on her hands and knees toward me. She was covered in her husband blood, sobbing hysterically. I looked up at the balcony. Warden Miller stepped out of the shadows. He was holding a scoped hunting rifle. He lowered the weapon and nodded to me once. Police officers swarmed Gavin. They tackled him to the ground, pinning him while he thrashed and screamed about his hand. Chief Washington holstered his weapon. He looked at me, then up at Miller. He shook his head with a small, impressed smile. "Nice shot," he muttered. I walked over to Gavin. He was handcuffed now, crying face pressed into the floor. I looked down at him. "I told you, Gavin," I said, my voice cold as the grave. "I told you 30 days of hell." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with pain and hatred. "You are a monster," he wept. "No, son," I said, turning away. "I am just a father who takes care of his business." I looked at Zoe. She was sitting on the floor shaking. She looked up at me, waiting for me to comfort her, waiting for me to tell her it was okay. But I didn't. I looked at the police. "Take him away," I said, "and get a statement from my daughter. She has a lot to tell you. The war was won, the enemy was broken." But as I stood in that ballroom, surrounded by the wreckage of my family, I knew the hardest part was yet to come. I had to rebuild, and I had to do it alone. The air in the ballroom was toxic, thick with the smell of expensive cologne mixed with the copper tang of terror. Gavin Pierce stood with his back to the service doors, his arm locked around my daughter's neck like a vice. The steak knife in his hand was trembling, not from hesitation, but from the adrenaline of a man who knows he is already dead. He looked at the police officers with their weapons drawn, then he looked at me. He expected me to beg. He expected me to fall to my knees and plead for the life of the daughter who had betrayed me. He wanted to see Luther Banks, the father, break. But he was looking at Luther Banks, the survivor. I did not move. I did not flinch. I planted my feet on the marble floor and rested my weight on the silver-headed cane. The sound of the ebony wood striking the stone was the only sound in the room. Tap. It was a sound of authority. A sound that said I was not afraid of a boy with a kitchen utensil. Gavin screamed for a car again, his voice cracking into a high-pitched wail that grated on the ears. He was sweating profusely, the moisture slicking his hair to his forehead, making him look manic and small. "Stay back!" he shrieked, pressing the blade closer to Zoe's skin. "I mean it, old man. I will open her up right here. I have nothing to lose." "You have your life, Gavin," I said, my voice low and steady, rolling across the room like thunder. "And right now, that is a very fragile thing." I took a step forward. Tap. Gavin flinched, dragging Zoe back a few inches. She was sobbing quietly, her hands clawing uselessly at his arm. Her eyes were locked on mine, pleading silent apologies that I was not ready to accept. "Do not take another step," Gavin warned, his knuckles turning white on the knife handle. "I will kill her, Luther. I swear to God I will kill her, and it will be your fault." I stopped. I looked him up and down, analyzing him like a mechanic analyzes a broken engine. I saw the tremors in his legs. I saw the way his eyes darted to the exits every 2 seconds. He was not a killer. He was a coward who had been cornered. "You do not have the guts, son," I said calmly. Gavin's eyes widened. He looked insulted. "What did you say?" he hissed. "I said you do not have the guts," I repeated, raising my voice just enough so everyone in the room could hear. "Killing takes conviction, Gavin. It takes a certain kind of darkness that you do not possess. You are a thief. You are a liar. You are a forger. But a killer, no, you are just a frightened little boy playing dress-up in a man-suit." I saw the rage flare in his eyes. I was goading him. I was pushing him. It was a dangerous game playing chicken with a desperate man, but I needed him focused on me. I needed him to forget about the police. I needed him to forget about the exits. "You think you know me?" Gavin shouted, spitting as he spoke. "You do not know anything about me. I did what I had to do. I did it for us, for the family. You did it for yourself," I corrected him. "You did it because you are weak. You stole from an old man because you were too lazy to work. You tried to poison me because you were too scared to face your debts. And now you are holding a knife to your wife's throat because you are too cowardly to face the consequences." "Shut up," he screamed, shaking Zoe violently. "Shut up, or I will do it. Do it." "Then," I challenged him, spreading my arms wide. The police chief took a breath, ready to intervene, but I held up a hand, stopping him. This was between me and the man who tried to steal my legacy. "Drop the knife, Gavin," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried absolute finality. "Drop it, and maybe you walk out of here in handcuffs instead of a body bag." Gavin looked at the knife. Then he looked at me. For a second, I saw the hesitation. I saw the doubt. He was breaking. The pressure was too much. But then he looked at Zoe. He looked at the woman who had been his partner in crime, his ticket to the good life, and he saw that she was looking at me with hope. He saw that she had chosen her father over him in her heart. The jealousy snapped something inside him. The cowardice turned into malice. "You think you won?" he whispered, his eyes going dead. "You think you can just take her back? No. If I cannot have the money, nobody gets anything." He tightened his grip on the knife. The hesitation vanished. He wasn't looking for an escape anymore. He was looking for revenge. I watched the muscles in his forearm tense. I watched the blade bite into the skin of my daughter's neck. A thin ribbon of bright red blood blossomed on Zoe White's skin. She screamed a sound of pure terror that tore through the ballroom. "Daddy!" she shrieked. Gavin was smiling now, a sick, twisted smile of a man who has decided to burn the world down. "Watch this old man," he hissed, preparing to draw the blade across her throat. "Watch her bleed." He moved his arm. I did not scream. I did not run. I looked up. I looked toward the darkened balcony on the mezzanine level directly above Gavin's head. I locked eyes with the shadow standing there. Now I commanded. It was not a shout. It was a statement of fact. The sound that followed was not like the movies. It was not a bang. It was a deafening crack, like the sky splitting open. The impact was immediate and visceral. Gavin's right leg, the one he had planted to brace himself for the killing stroke, kicked out from under him as if it had been struck by a sledgehammer. A high-caliber round, fired from a precision rifle, tore through his thigh, shattering the femur and severing the muscle. Gavin screamed. It was a sound that stripped the humanity from the room. He collapsed instantly, the knife flying from his hand and skittering across the marble floor. He hit the ground, writhing, clutching his shattered leg, blood pooling rapidly around him, staining the white floor crimson. Zoe scrambled away, crawling on her hands and knees, her hands clutching her bleeding neck. She was hyperventilating, gasping for air, her eyes wide with shock. I stood over the scene, my cane resting on the floor, my heart hammering a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. From the balcony above, a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was Warden Miller. Big Jim. He was holding a scoped tactical rifle, the barrel still smoking slightly. He did not look like a corrections officer. He looked like the angel of death. He lowered the rifle, resting the stock against his shoulder, and looked down at me. He nodded once. A silent salute from one soldier to another. The spell in the room broke. "Go, go, go," Chief Washington shouted. The police officers surged forward, a wave of blue uniforms swarming the fallen man. They did not treat him gently. They pinned him to the ground, avoiding the pool of blood, forcing his hands behind his back. Gavin was howling, sobbing, begging for a doctor, begging for mercy, begging for his mother. "My leg," he screamed over and over. "You shot my leg. Oh God, it hurts." I walked toward him. The police officers parted, letting me pass. They knew who was in charge here. I stopped right next to his head. I looked down at the man who had slept in my house, who had eaten my food, who had tried to bury me in a concrete box. He looked up at me, his face gray with shock and blood loss, his eyes filled with agony. You shot me," he wheezed. "I did not shoot you, Gavin," I said, my voice cold as ice. "The warden did. I just gave the order." He tried to move, but the pain was too great. He slumped back against the floor, defeated, broken. "Why?" he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Why didn't you just let me go?" "Because you hurt my family," I said, "and nobody hurts my family and walks away." I leaned in closer, resting my weight on the lionhead cane. "I told you I was going to take everything, Gavin. I took your deal, I took your freedom, and now I took your leg. Consider it a down payment on the debt you owe me." Paramedics rushed into the room, pushing past the police to get to the wounded man. They began working on his leg, applying tourniquets, shouting medical jargon. I stepped back, giving them room. I did not care if they saved the leg or not. He would not be needing it where he was going. I turned to look for Zoe. She was sitting against the wall, a paramedic tending to the cut on her neck. It was superficial, a scratch compared to what could have happened. But the look in her eyes told me the real wound was much deeper. She was looking at me. She was shaking. I walked over to her. The paramedic stepped aside. "Daddy," she whispered, reaching out a hand stained with her husband's blood. I looked at her hand. I remembered holding it when she was a baby. I remembered holding it when she walked down the aisle to marry the man who just tried to kill her. I did not take it. "You are safe, Zoe," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "He cannot hurt you anymore." She sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "I am so sorry, Daddy. I am so sorry for everything. Please forgive me." I looked at her huddled form. I felt a pang of sadness, a ghost of the love I once had. But then I remembered the courtroom. I remembered the lies she told the judge. I remembered her signing the deed. "Forgiveness is for God, Zoe," I said, turning my back on her. I walked away toward the center of the room where Chief Washington was waiting. "Is it done?" Luther the chief asked, looking at the chaotic scene. "It is done, Chief," I replied. "Book him. Fraud, forgery, attempted murder, and add kidnapping to the list. I want him buried under the jail." Washington nodded. "Consider it done." "And the daughter." I paused. I looked back at Zoe one last time. She was being helped to her feet by a nurse. She looked small and pathetic. "Process her," I said, my voice hard. "She was an accomplice. She signed the papers. She knew about the poison. She is just as guilty as he is." The chief looked surprised, but he nodded. He respected the code. "You do the crime, you do the time." I walked out of the ballroom. I walked past the stunned hotel staff. I walked past the guests who were whispering and pointing. I walked out into the bright afternoon sun. Warden Miller was waiting by the Rolls-Royce. He had already stowed the rifle. He opened the back door for me. "Good shooting, Jim," I said as I climbed in. "Just like old times," Boss Miller said, closing the door. I sat back in the leather seat. I was tired. My bones ached. My soul felt heavy. But I was free, and justice had been served. I touched the ring on my finger. "Drive, Jim," I said. "We have one more stop to make." "Where to?" Boss Miller asked, starting the engine. "The old neighborhood," I said. "I want to see the land. I want to see what we saved." As the car pulled away, I did not look back at the hotel. I did not look back at the wreckage of my family. I looked forward. The lion had reclaimed his kingdom. Now it was time to rebuild. The paramedics were busy stabilizing Gavin on the stretcher, but my eyes were fixed on the woman sitting against the wall. Zoe was shaking uncontrollably, a blanket draped over her shoulders by a sympathetic nurse. Her neck was bandaged where the knife had drawn blood, a stark white contrast against her skin. She looked small, broken, and terrified. When she saw me looking at her, she pushed the nurse away and scrambled to her feet. She stumbled across the room, her heels clicking frantically on the marble floor. She did not look like the woman who had sneered at me in the visitation booth just days ago. She looked like the little girl who used to scrape her knees and come running home for a bandage. "Daddy," she cried, her voice raw. She threw herself at my feet, grabbing my legs. She buried her face in the fabric of my suit, sobbing so hard her entire body convulsed. "Oh, God." "Daddy," she wept, clutching me tight. "Thank you. You saved me. He was going to kill me. I was so scared." I looked down at the top of her head. I felt the wetness of her tears soaking into my trousers. For a heartbeat, a single treacherous heartbeat, I wanted to reach down and stroke her hair. I wanted to tell her it was over. I wanted to be her father again. But then, I looked over her shoulder at the table where the unsigned deed still lay. I looked at the screen where the video of Gavin plotting my murder was frozen. And I remembered. I remembered the look on her face when the police dragged me out of my bedroom. I remembered the pen in her hand when she signed the commitment papers. I remembered her voice in the prison telling me to rot. "I am sorry, Daddy," she babbled, looking up at me with mascara running down her cheeks. "I was wrong. I was so wrong. I should have listened to you. Gavin is a monster. He brainwashed me. But we can fix it now, right? We can go home." She was pleading for absolution. She was trying to rewrite history in real time, painting herself as the victim of a spell rather than a willing participant in a conspiracy. She thought that because I had stopped Gavin from killing her, that meant I had forgiven her. She thought that saving her life was the same as saving her future. I did not know what I was doing, she sobbed, tightening her grip on my legs. "I love you, Daddy. Please tell them. Tell them I am a victim. Take me home." I stood there like a statue. I felt the weight of my cane in my hand. I felt the cold silver of the ring on my finger. "You are a victim of your husband's violence, Zoe." I said, my voice flat and devoid of the warmth she was desperate to hear. "But you are not a victim of his greed. You were his partner." "No," she screamed, shaking her head. "No, I wasn't. I was scared." I had to do what he said. I looked at Chief Washington, who was watching us with a somber expression. I looked at Solomon Gold, who was standing nearby holding a thick manila envelope. "Solomon," I said. My lawyer stepped forward. Zoe let go of my legs. She looked at Solomon, then back at me, confusion clouding her tear-filled eyes. "Daddy, what is happening?" she asked, her voice trembling. I looked down at her. I saw the fear return, but this time it was not fear of a knife. It was fear of judgment. "Get up, Zoe," I commanded. She slowly rose to her feet, wiping her face. She tried to smile, a weak, hopeful thing that broke my heart because it was a lie. "We are going home now," she asked, reaching for my hand. I pulled my hand away. I brushed the dust from my trousers where she had clung to me. "No, Zoe," I said. "I am going home. You are going somewhere else." I nodded to Solomon. "Give it to her," I said. Solomon handed the envelope to Zoe. "What is this?" she whispered, taking it with shaking hands. "Open it," I said. She tore open the envelope. She pulled out the documents. As she read the header, her knees buckled and she had to grab the edge of the banquet table to stay upright. State of Georgia versus Zoe Pierce. The charges were listed in bold black ink: conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, elder abuse, accessory to attempted murder. This is a mistake," she stammered, looking at me with wild eyes. "Daddy, tell them this is wrong." "It is not a mistake," I said, my voice hardening into stone. "It is a receipt. A receipt for everything you bought over the last 6 months." "But I am your daughter," she shrieked, dropping the papers. "You cannot send your own daughter to jail." "I watched you sign a paper that said—" "I was insane," I said, stepping closer to her. "I watched you stand by while your husband threw your mother ashes in the trash. I heard you tell me to rot in a cell." "I was angry," she cried. "I didn't mean it." "You meant every word," I replied. "You meant it when you spent my money on vacations. You meant it when you tried to sell my land to a poison factory. You only stopped meaning it when the knife was at your throat." I looked at Chief Washington. "Chief," I said, "she is all yours." Washington nodded. He signaled to 2 female officers standing by the door. They walked toward us, their faces grim. They carried handcuffs on their belts. "No," Zoe screamed, backing away. "No, Daddy, please. Do not let them take me. I will be good. I promise I will be good." She sounded like a 5-year-old who had been caught stealing cookies, not a 30-year-old woman who had tried to destroy her father. The officers grabbed her arms. "Zoe Pierce, you are under arrest." Washington recited the words heavy in the air. "Do not touch me," Zoe yelled, struggling. "Daddy, help me. Tell them to stop." She looked at me, her eyes wide with betrayal, as if I was the one betraying her. "You are supposed to protect me," she screamed, as the cuffs clicked shut around her wrists. "You are my father. I am your father," I said, watching them turn her around. "And a father's job is to teach his children the difference between right and wrong. You never learned. So now the state has to teach you." They began to drag her toward the exit. She fought them, kicking and screaming. Her cries echoed off the high ceilings, a haunting sound of privilege meeting consequence. "I hate you," she howled, twisting her head to look at me one last time. "I hate you. You are evil. You are sending me to hell." "I did not send you there, Zoe," I whispered to the empty space where she had stood. "You drove yourself there. I just stopped paying for the gas." I watched until they dragged her through the double doors. I watched until her screams faded into the hallway. The room was quiet again. The paramedics were wheeling Gavin out on a gurney. He was unconscious, sedated for the pain. He did not see his wife being arrested. He did not see his empire crumble. I stood alone in the center of the ballroom. I felt old. I felt tired. The adrenaline that had sustained me was fading, leaving behind a deep, aching sorrow. I had won. I had defeated my enemies. I had saved my property. But the cost was my family. I was the last Banks left standing. Warden Miller walked up to me. He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay, boss?" he asked softly. I looked at the ring on my finger. The lion. "I am alive, Jim," I said. "That is enough for today." Solomon approached, packing his briefcase. "The arraignment is tomorrow morning," he said. "Do you want to be there?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "I do not want to see them. Not in court. Not in a cell. I am done." Solomon nodded. "I will handle it. They will not get bail. Not with the evidence we have. They are going away for a long time, Luther." "Good," I said. I turned and walked toward the exit. I leaned heavily on my cane. My leg hurt. My heart hurt. But as I walked out into the lobby, I saw something that made me stop. Through the glass doors of the hotel, I saw the city skyline. I saw the sun setting over the buildings, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. I saw the neighborhood where I grew up, the neighborhood I had just saved from being turned into a toxic wasteland. I walked out the doors. The air was cool and fresh. Chief Washington was waiting by his car. He saw me and tipped his hat. "Justice is served, Mr. Banks," he said. "Yes, Chief," I replied. "It is cold, but it is served." I walked to the Rolls-Royce where Miller was waiting. He opened the door. "Take me home, Jim," I said. "To the house?" Miller asked. "No," I said. "The house is a crime scene. Take me to the shelter, the one on 4th Street. Miller looked surprised, but he nodded. "You got it, boss." I climbed into the car. As we drove away, I did not look back at the hotel. I did not think about Zoe in a holding cell. I did not think about Gavin in the hospital. I thought about the future. I thought about the ring on my finger. I was Luther Banks. I was a mechanic. I was a father. I was a survivor. And I had work to do. 1 year, 365 days. To a free man, a year is a collection of birthdays, holidays, and weekends. To a prisoner, a year is a single endless gray day repeated over and over until the soul begins to rot. The state penitentiary did not smell like bleach anymore. It smelled of despair and unwashed bodies packed too close together. The air was thick and humid, a constant reminder that we were buried alive in concrete. Gavin Pierce was no longer the arrogant real estate mogul who sipped expensive scotch and planned murders. He was inmate 4429. He was a man broken in body and spirit. The sniper round that had shattered his wrist and the subsequent surgery on his leg had left him with a permanent limp and a clawed hand that ached when it rained. In the prison yard, he was not a predator. He was prey. He shuffled across the exercise yard, his eyes glued to the dirt. He had lost 30 pounds. His once perfectly styled hair was shaved close to his skull, revealing the shape of a man who had lost his identity. He flinched at loud noises. He jumped when shadows moved. He had learned the hard way that his silver tongue held no currency here. In here, real estate deals did not matter. Money on the outside did not matter if you could not access it. And Gavin had nothing. I had ensured that every asset he tried to hide, every account he tried to squirrel away was seized, frozen, or drained by the relentless legal team of Solomon Gold. He was destitute. He was alone. And he was terrified. Across the complex in the women wing, Zoe was learning a similar lesson. My daughter, the girl who thought she deserved the world because of her last name, was scrubbing industrial floors for 12 cents an hour. I received reports from Warden Miller contacts. Zoe had stopped crying months ago. Now she just existed. She walked through the days like a ghost, her eyes hollowed out by the realization that she had thrown away a kingdom for a man who would have slit her throat to save himself. She wrote me letters every week, long rambling letters begging for forgiveness, begging for money for the commissary, begging for a second chance. I never opened them. I burned them in the fireplace of my new office, watching the smoke rise up the chimney, carrying her empty words away into the night. But today was different. Today I was not burning letters. Today I was going back to the belly of the beast. I walked through the visitor security checkpoint. The guards did not frisk me. They nodded respectfully, recognizing the man who had turned their prison into a fortress of justice a year ago. I walked into the visitation room. It was the same room where Zoe had tried to force me to sign the deed. The same glass partition, the same metal stools, but the dynamic had flipped. I sat down on the free side. I was wearing a charcoal wool suit, the fabric soft and expensive. My shoes were polished. On my hand, the silver ring with the lion crest shone under the fluorescent lights. Gavin was brought in. He was in chains. He shuffled to the chair and sat down, wincing as his bad leg bent. He picked up the receiver with his good hand, his movements slow and defeated. He looked at me. His eyes were sunken, surrounded by dark bruises of exhaustion. When he saw who it was, a flicker of desperate hope sparked in his gaze. It was pathetic. "Luther," he whispered, his voice raspy. "You came." I looked at him. I did not smile. I did not frown. I looked at him with the indifference of a mountain looking at a pebble. "I came, Gavin," I said. "Please, Luther, you have to help me." Gavin begged, leaning close to the glass, his breath fogging the surface. "It is hell in here. I cannot take it anymore. The other inmates, they know I was soft. They steal my food. They beat me." He held up his good hand, showing me a fresh cut on his cheek. "I need protection." Gavin wept. "I need money on my books. I need a transfer to protective custody. Please, Luther." I learned my lesson. I swear to God I learned it. I am sorry. I am so sorry for everything. Just help me survive. I listened to him beg. I listened to the man who had laughed while dumping my wife ashes into the garbage. I listened to the man who had plotted to inject me with insulin and stop my heart. He thought that time had softened me. He thought that seeing him broken would trigger some misplaced sense of mercy. He was wrong. You owe money, Gavin, I said calmly. Gavin froze. His eyes darted side to side. What, he stammered. The debts, I said. The 50,000 to the loan sharks, the 40,000 to the Russians. You thought because you went to prison those debts disappeared. Gavin swallowed hard. I cannot pay them. I am in here. They cannot touch me in here. That is where you are wrong, son, I said. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the metal ledge. Debts do not vanish, Gavin. They are sold. They are traded. And do you know who bought your debt? Gavin shook his head slowly, terror creeping back into his eyes. I did, I whispered. I bought every single promissory note. I paid off the sharks. I paid off the Russians. I own your debt, Gavin. Every cent of it. Gavin looked confused. Why? Why would you do that? So I could collect, I said. I pointed a finger at the door behind him, the door that led back to the cell block. You have a new cellmate moving in today, Gavin. His name is Michael Thompson. But on the street, they call him Big Mike. Gavin's face turned the color of old paper. He knew the name. Everyone knew the name. Big Mike was an enforcer for the syndicate, a man who was serving 20 years for breaking men in half with his bare hands. I transferred your debt to him, I said, my voice cold and final. I gave him the paper. I told him that you are responsible for paying him back. With interest. No. Gavin gasped, dropping the phone. No, you cannot do that. He will kill me. He won't kill you, I said. Dead men cannot pay. But he will make sure you work. He will make sure you serve every minute of your sentence in service to him. You are his property now, Gavin. Just like you wanted my house to be your property. Gavin began to hyperventilate. He clawed at the glass, screaming silently. Please, Luther, no, do not do this. I am family. You are an investment, I said, standing up. And I just liquidated you. I hung up the phone. Gavin was screaming, pounding on the glass, his face contorted in absolute horror. The guards stepped forward, pulling him back. They dragged him away, his chains rattling, his cries echoing off the concrete walls. He was going back to his cell, back to Big Mike, back to a hell of his own making. I turned and walked out of the visitation room. I did not look back. There was nothing left to see. The scales were balanced. The ledger was closed. I walked out of the prison gates into the crisp autumn air. The sky was a brilliant blue, the clouds white and fluffy. It was a beautiful day to be free. Warden Miller was waiting by the Rolls-Royce. He held the door open, a small, satisfied smile on his face. Is it done? Boss Miller asked. It is done, Jim, I said, getting into the car. The transfer is complete. Miller closed the door and got into the driver's seat. The engine purred to life, a sound of refined power. Where to now? Miller asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror. Take me to the Bottoms, I said. Take me home. The car glided down the highway, leaving the gray walls of the prison behind. We drove toward the city, toward the skyline that rose like a promise in the distance. But we did not go to the wealthy district. We did not go to the penthouses or the country clubs. We drove to the neighborhood everyone had forgotten, the neighborhood Gavin had tried to sell for scrap. As we turned onto Martin Luther King Boulevard, I looked out the window. It was not the same neighborhood it was a year ago. The trash was gone. The boarded-up windows were replaced with fresh glass. The graffiti had been painted over with murals celebrating our history, our heroes, our strength. I saw new businesses opening, a bakery, a barber shop, a bookstore. I saw people walking down the street with their heads held high. I had spent the last year pouring my resources into this place. I had used the money I had, hidden the money Gavin wanted to steal to rebuild the community block by block. Miller slowed the car as we approached the lot where my ancestral land stood. The land that was supposed to be a toxic waste incinerator. It was not a wasteland. It was a paradise. A massive new building stood in the center of the green park. It was built of red brick and glass, modern and welcoming. A playground was filled with children, their laughter ringing out like music. A basketball court was packed with teenagers. A community garden was blooming with vegetables and flowers. Above the entrance of the building, large silver letters gleamed in the sun. The Beatrice Banks Youth Center. Miller stopped the car. I opened the door and stepped out. I leaned on my cane, taking a deep breath of the clean air. There was no smoke. There was no poison. There was only life. A group of children ran past, chasing a soccer ball. They stopped when they saw me. They did not know I was the man who paid for their jerseys. They did not know I was the man who saved their playground. They just saw an old man in a nice suit. "Hey, mister," one of the boys yelled. "Can you kick the ball?" I looked at the ball at his feet. I looked at his smiling face. I smiled back. It was a real smile, a smile that reached my eyes and warmed the cold places in my heart. "I can try, son," I said. I walked toward them, my cane tapping a rhythm on the fresh pavement. I had lost a daughter. I had lost a son-in-law. I had been betrayed, beaten, and locked in a cage. But looking at those children playing on the land my grandfather bought, the land my wife loved, I realized I had not lost my legacy. I had just found new heirs. I touched the silver ring on my finger one last time. The lion was not sleeping anymore. He was watching over his pride. And for the first time in a long time, Luther Banks was truly home. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to know that it is never too late to fight back. Subscribe for more stories from the underground. This is Luther Banks signing off. Stay strong, stay loyal, and never let them take what is yours. The biggest mistake my family made wasn't greed. It was underestimating the man they called old. They mistook my silence for weakness and my kindness for stupidity. But life has a funny way of teaching us that blood doesn't make you family, loyalty does. You can strip a man of his home and his freedom, but you can never strip him of his character. When you build your castle on lies, it only takes one stone to bring it all down. Never mistake a sleeping lion for a dead one. If you believe that betrayal should never go unpunished, hit that like button and subscribe to see more justice served.